I know I have my doubters, and I know I need to prove them wrong, and I will. I get it. I feel it. And I take responsibility. I'm not going to walk away.
Well, let's not pretend that he's going to move the dial in any constituency in the north of England with that speech today.
I therefore think it's time for us to look for new leadership.
Was that enough for Keir Starmer to safeguard his job?
Well, no, it's not enough to go out and make a speech, but it is certainly the right thing to have done in this moment.
I think it's fair to say this evening that things are now moving quite quickly. It's very febrile and it's very uncertain.
Hello, as you join us, 3 ministerial aides have quit their government jobs and scores of MPs are urging Sir Keir Starmer to stand down. He had 21 minutes to save his premiership, and with every passing minute since, his chances of political survival appear to be dwindling. Just 30 seconds after he opened his mouth, this is how Sir Keir Starmer tried to save his job with a mea culpa about last week's elections.
I get it. I feel it. And I take responsibility. But it's not just about taking responsibility for the results. It's about taking responsibility to explain how, as a political and electoral force, we will be better and do better in the months and years ahead.
Here's the thing, though. He used exactly the same words after last year's local election debacle.
I get it. We were elected in to deliver change. We've begun that. Waiting lists are coming down, 3 million extra appointments. Wages are going up faster than prices, hugely important for people in a cost of living crisis. And interest rates are coming down, which for mortgage holders is hugely important. The message I take away from these results is we must deliver that change even more quickly. We must go even further.
A year on, he's still saying, and I quote, change can't come quickly enough. The problem is dozens of his own MPs, now including ministerial aides, have another change in mind, changing the leader.
I don't think we saw a plan from the Prime Minister this morning in order to implement the kind of change that this country needs, and I therefore think it's time for us to look for new leadership. And I think what that means is the Prime Minister rightly now setting out a timetable and an orderly process for a leadership election.
So after the milestones, the resets, the missions, the slogans, the PM is beset on all sides. Labour supporter, comedian David Baddiel has been chatting to me. He says he's moved to sympathy. Do you almost feel sorry for him then?
Yeah, I sort of do feel sorry for him, yeah.
For his long-suffering backbenchers, though, sympathy is in short supply and patience is running out. Parliamentary private secretaries have tendered their resignations in protest. Now it's down to the Cabinet and his rivals within it to decide whether to act. So a 21-minute speech bought him some time, hours, most likely days, but weeks and months? Possibly not. Well, some are describing this as Team Wes Streeting making their move tonight. Let's go straight to our political editor, Beth Rigby, who's in Downing Street. Beth.
Yes, Cathy. So we picked up earlier that there could be growing coordination after many backbenchers over the weekend and came out and said that the Prime Minister had to go. That has ticked up all day today, with now 58 MPs calling on Keir Starmer to go. But what really tipped it shortly earlier today was when some of the ministerial aides, these are the most junior members of government, came out and resigned. 3 of them resigned, another did not resign but called on Starmer to go. And this was the beginning, I'm told, of a more coordinated move that started with the backbenchers, moved up to ministerial aides. We understand that there will be more ministerial aid resignations this evening, and I am hearing from sources that it will now be the Cabinet, some Cabinet members going into the Prime Minister and telling him that the game is up. How that happens is quite unclear. One source telling me that they thought they would get go in individually. Another figure saying that some of them could confront him even at Cabinet tomorrow. But I think what's clear is that now there is quite a move of pressure now on Keir Starmer, and it moves right up to his Cabinet, with some of the senior members of his Cabinet telling him that he's lost confidence of the party, he's lost confidence of some of his Cabinet ministers. Then he's got to really decide how he responds and reacts to that. Now, up to this moment, he has been absolutely resolute in saying that he would fight on, but if he cannot command the support of his Cabinet, he might feel that he's unable to do so.
Beth, I'm sure we'll be back to you later in the programme. This story seems to be developing fast. Thanks so much for that update. Well, Labour peer Aisha Hazarika, former Conservative Cabinet Minister now with Reform, Nadeem Zahawi, on the sofa tonight alongside our Deputy Political Editor, Sam Coates. Aisha, let me start with you. I mean, things do really seem to be snowballing tonight in the last few hours, don't they?
They really have done. And I think everybody was waiting for that speech this morning. You know, there was a lot of pressure put on that speech, and we were told this was going to be the make or break speech. And look, there was a lot of pressure anyway. I think, you know, it would have taken a lot for anyone to have lived up to the expectations. But unfortunately, the Prime Minister just did not meet the moment. It did not feel like this was a big speech that was bristling with really kind of raw, robust honesty and radical honesty about the scale of the challenge and how difficult things were. It sort of felt like a midterm conference speech. There wasn't any big new policy announcements. It didn't feel like it really changed the needle. And I think since that moment, things have moved incredibly quickly. I mean, even as we're sat here now, I'm getting messages from people. It does feel, and this is a phrase you'll remember, it feels like the herd may be moving.
Yeah, well...
that's what I said.
I'm going to get exactly. I'm going to get the latest from Beth in just a few minutes, because this is a minute-by-minute story back in Downing Street. But Nadeem, yeah, the herd moving, is it bringing back sort of pretty horrible memories?
It is
when
pretty horrible.
You had to call for Boris Johnson to quit?
It is awful on him and his family. He's clearly not up to the job. I think Aisha's point about the speech today was so wooden that it just was difficult to watch. And I was the one, when I was Chancellor, that had to go in and see the Prime Minister. Actually,
a day after you became Chancellor, right?
I had to say to him that the herd is stampeding, and I'm afraid there's very little we could do to stop it, and we were trying our best. Very similar in many ways. That you've got the King's Speech coming up. We had a planned economic moment that I was working on to sort of really reset the Premiership, but it was too late, and it feels the same tonight. I just think, he's not up to the job, and in many ways, if you look at what happened in the local elections, there'll be plenty of research on this, but a lot of the passion and the people going out to vote for reform, our big message was, vote reform, get rid of Starmer. And it's clearly where the nation is at.
Well, we'll unpick some of that in just a second. And Sam, I know you've been doing your research. I'm going to come back to you in just a moment. Let's return to Beth in Downing Street, just for a little bit more detail on the role of the Cabinet here. Beth, you were hearing Nadeem there talking about how he'd been Chancellor a day and, he had to go into Boris Johnson and get him to quit. Is there coordination in the Cabinet and between, we were hearing about Wes Streeting's ministerial aid, for example. How coordinated are these moves that we're seeing in the last few hours?
Well, what I was told by two very well-informed sources earlier today was that we should look for the backbenchers agitating. It would then move up to the ministerial aides, and then after that it would move up to the Cabinet, and members of the Cabinet, perhaps some of the old guard, the likes of Yvette Cooper or John Healey or maybe Ed Miliband, going in and quietly having a word with the Prime Minister and telling him that this situation is not sustainable. And that is beginning to play out. We've seen the beginning of the ministerial aid resignations. My sources are telling me, one source saying, a minister saying that the Cabinet have all been talking in today. Another source is telling me that they expect the Cabinet to go in one by one and have a word with Keir Starmer. A third source is saying that they expect perhaps some of the Cabinet to talk to him at a Cabinet meeting tomorrow morning. And it is all building into a sense of, yes, that it is becoming unsustainable for Keir Starmer. He's had now, I think, 59 of his MPs publicly calling on him to stand down. He's having those ministerial aid resignations. We've already had 3. We should expect some more this evening. And then you have Wes Streeting, the Health Secretary. He has made it clear to the Prime Minister that he would not directly challenge him. But if the dam bursts, if you like, and it becomes really clear that Keir Starmer is going to face a challenge, that he cannot command the confidence of his party, that his Cabinet is not united behind him, will it be that Wes Streeting sees this as his chance and he goes for the leadership? It would benefit Wes Streeting to go early, because the biggest challenger would be Andy Burnham, and Andy Burnham is not a member of Parliament and has not got a clear route back. Now, I was told over the weekend that Andy Burnham does have a seat where he could stand, and it might be in the coming days we hear more from him on that. But for now, he is not in Westminster, and he is not on the pitch or in the game here. So it's really, really febrile. It's really uncertain. And now the big question is whether those Cabinet ministers do go in and approach Keir Starmer. But I think part of the issue here is the Cabinet is not unified. The Cabinet does not have a clear choice of a candidate. They are not uniting around one figure to succeed Keir Starmer, and that means it could get really messy. Keir Starmer says he's not going to go, that he'll fight any challenge. Angela Rayner and the soft left, I don't think, will let Wes Streeting stand uncontested. Andy Burnham is not back in government, and I think that paints for you a sort of sense of the chaos around this and how messy it could get. And now really all eyes are on the Cabinet, and do they, looking at these ministerial aids, do they go in, as people are telling me, and quietly tell Keir Starmer that the game is up and that he needs to plan some sort of succession?
Right. And Beth, just briefly, what are you hearing from allies of the Prime Minister? A dwindling bunch, clearly, but, you know, are they saying anything about the kind of state he's in Number 10? Well,
I think what's quite interesting at the moment is, if you think back to February, when all of the Mandelson allegations really burst forth and the Prime Minister was under really acute pressure, and Anas Sarwar, Scottish leader in Labour's Scottish leader, called on his resignation, the Cabinet all piled out very soon after Anas Sarwar made the call for the PM's resignation to back him. Full-throated they were in their support, and it just has not felt like that this weekend, and there is not much pushback even now from Downing Street or supportive Cabinet members trying to fight off this growing body of MPs and ministerial aides calling for him to go, and I think that is quite telling. Look, you had Peter Carl out this morning. Cathy, I think you spoke to Lisa Nandy. You've had Steve Reid out talking to me this afternoon. So there are Cabinet ministers prepared to come out in support of Keir Starmer. But obviously that support is dwindling. I mean, I think what will happen tonight is that they will be desperately hitting the phones trying to get support. But, you know, it is very, very uncertain tonight. And the noise, really, and the drumbeat saying that he's got to go, that it's not sustainable, that he doesn't have the confidence of the party, it's just getting louder and louder and louder.
Well, Beth, we'll be sure to come back to you. We've got an extended programme tonight, so lots more developments, I'm sure. But thanks very much for now, Beth in Downing Street. So, Aisha, you were sitting listening to that, hearing about Wes Streeting there and the fact that one of his ministerial aides has quit. The Cabinet expected to make their views known to the Prime Minister. Just tell us about what will be going through Wes's mind and whether this is the chance for him to now launch this bid that has been sort of rumoured for so long.
Well, I think he will be very much thinking, if I don't go now, I might miss my opportunity because, as you say, Angela Rayner's tax affairs haven't yet been sorted out. It's unclear whether or not she actually wants to go for the top job. But certainly there's a huge amount of support growing for Andy Burnham, I would say, throughout the PLP. And I think that decision to block Andy Burnham from standing in that by-election did go down really, really badly. A lot of people are very angry about that. And there's a lot of people who, even though they might not be natural Andy Burnham supporters, have definitely warmed to the idea. But Beth is right. There is still currently no clear successor. And changing the face at the top of the party is not enough. You know, what's the new vision? What are the policies? You know, what are some of the solutions to the big, deep structural problems that this country face?
But has it gone beyond that tonight? I mean, you're a Labour peer. What are your colleagues saying about whether this is really now terminal for the Prime Minister?
Gosh, so I feel really difficult. I think people do feel it's over. And I say that with an incredibly heavy heart. I'm somebody who really, really supported Keir Starmer, and he took the party from being an absolute wreck, and he brought it into government, something that only 4 Labour leaders have done with a working majority. But he always said, you know, you have to put the country first. It's not just about what the party wants; it's about what the country needs. And personally, I think a lot of people, and I know Nadeem is now a reform person, but there's a lot of people who are really worried about the prospect of a Nigel Farage government. In fact, Keir Starmer alluded to that in his own speech today. And you have to listen to what people are telling you on the doorstep and what the public are telling you. And I've spent so much time over the weekend speaking to MPs, speaking to councillors who lost their seats, people in Scotland and Wales as well. I experienced it myself when I went out on the doorstep. There is such negativity. And some of that, I think, is quite unfair. I mean, I think some of the vitriol that is levelled against Keir Starmer is not fair and it's not justified.
David Baddiel was saying to me, we'll see the interview later in the show, that, you know, a lot of it is down to sort of vitriol on social media.
Totally. But I do think, with a really, really heavy heart, I'm not saying that changing the leader will guarantee that Labour can turn things around, but I think it could give Labour a better shot, but it would be better.
Number 10 says it's it's a return of the psychodrama that, you know, he promised to get rid of.
You say that, the only thing I would say to that is the SNP has just changed their leader twice. They've just won an election. Mark Carney took over from Justin Trudeau and went on to win a big majority, even though it pains me to say it. When Boris Johnson took over from Theresa May, he went on to win. I mean, he did spaff it up the wall quite quickly, to be fair. But, so... It's
unparliamentary language.
Sorry, apologies.
Let me just bring in Nadeem here, because if they do change the leader now, you know, it looks increasingly likely, will you be demanding a general election?
Of course we will. Absolutely right. Because whoever comes in won't have a mandate and we should go to the country. But just picking up on Aisha's point on actually what are the policies, and I think the mistake that Labour are going to make is Starmer is a dead man walking, and it's just a matter of time for him realising, probably hours rather than days. But if they're going to go for Andy Burnham or, you know, tack further left with Angela Rayner, not deal with the small boats, illegal crossings that are reached about 200,000
Well,
now.
they're coming down
into the country.
sharply.
No, hold on a second. No. You're talking about legal
small
migration.
Boats
small boats are up by 13%. You can check the numbers.
But legal migration is coming down massively.
Listen, I'm just saying to you what I think where the nation is at, right? No real economic growth policy.
So small boats is coming down year on year, though, small boats crossing. Sam will be able to fact check on his sitting there on his laptop.
They haven't come down, right? I mean, this year they're up 13% year on year.
OK, we're going to fact check that and come back to you.
OK. What I'm saying is that whoever takes over, they're going to tack left, which I think will be further from where the country's at. The country wants to make sure that cost of living is dealt with. They won't deal with, you know, Ed Miliband will still be in cabinet, will probably still be pushing net zero, and we will hit them hard, as Richard Tice has been doing.
You cannot say that the whole of the country is right-wing. That's just not...
No, I didn't say that.
But you're saying if they tack left, you know, Labour is actually losing more support in terms of votes to the Greens and to the left than it is in terms of seats to Reform. And
Good
what Labour
luck to you if you think
but
you
what,
can-
but what
you're gonna
Labour
go
shouldn't
further
be
left
doing
and win an
is
election.
a kind of knee-jerk swing to the left or the right. It's about having the right combination of policies for the country.
And as Nigel Farage says, it's not about left or right, it's about delivering
just
for the
talked
country,
about tacking to
championing,
the left.
because they will not deal with the net zero madness. They will not deal with the illegal boat crossings.
but
they will
that's
not
just
deal
not
with
true.
growth. There's no
That
growth
is-
in the economy,
well, there was
and
no-
that is
there was
why
no
whatever
growth
happens.
when you were Chancellor for a day, and it was a short period of time, but there was very little growth at that
Thank
point.
you, Aisha.
Honestly.
It was my summer internship.
And it was like bring your friend to work day, basically.
I hear you.
But, you know, legal migration went up. So, you know, it's very easy in opposition to trot out the kind of policy lines and get it, and you've got your script. And in fact, I was
I've got no
quoting-
script.
I know your script. I spent
script.
enough time with you
Unlike
on
your Prime
Thursday
Minister,
night.
who had to have
you've both got
the
no
auto
script.
cue
It's
on.
fine.
I have no
But
script.
it's very, and this is one of the reasons why I think people are so worried about what lies ahead, because for a lot of people, there's lots of people that do want
Do
a
you
reform
think it was a
government.
smart idea
There's
today?
a lot of
Hang on,
people.
it was a smart idea today.
There's a lot of people who do not want a reform government, and that's everything still to play for. And what I would say is, well, look, it is not easy changing a leader, and I take Nadim's point, which is just changing the face at the top isn't the answer. It's about having the right policies, not scaring the bond markets, all of that. I get all of that. But there's a cost to not doing anything. And when you speak to any Democrat now and you look at what's happened in America, so many of them say, I wish we had done something earlier. I wish we had had the guts and the gumption and the sort of foresight to do something. Because what we do not want to do is sort of have a kind of Biden sort of Kamala Harris situation where we just gift it to somebody like Trump or Nigel Farage.
Let me bring in, Sam's been, tapping away on his laptop at the end of the sofa. What have you managed to establish, the last few hours about where the herd is moving, what's happening with the cabinet and so on? Tell us.
So at the moment, all eyes are on Wes Streeting. It's his team that have gone out in the last couple of hours, really, and resigned. We all know that this is his potential moment. This is the point where he has potentially the maximum advantage. His main rival is Andy Burnham. Andy Burnham is not currently an MP. It'll take 6-7 weeks, even if he announced a seat tomorrow, to get into Parliament. So could Wes Streeting, who is vulnerable to a challenge from the soft left of the party, use this window to get somewhere? There's a huge amount of speculation that tonight that is exactly what is going on. To people that say Wes Streeting's team have been silent, yes, but only up to a point. At 10 a.m. on Saturday morning, dropping into our inbox from Wes Streeting's team was a document talking about just how well he had done in the local elections in his area, in Redbridge. Redbridge was an area that was expected, he said, to be challenging in the local elections, but they wanted to make the point that in his locality, unlike in Angela Rayner's, he'd actually bucked the trend. So this idea that they haven't been shadow pitch rolling many of the arguments, I think, isn't right. All across the political spectrum, people are looking, I think, at Wes Streeting, which is just yet another ingredient into tomorrow morning's cabinet meeting. I mean, could we get the spectacle of Wes Streeting walking into cabinet, resigning, and then walking straight out to the cameras? I mean, that would be one hell of a way to announce that you had 81 leaders, 81 backers, and launching a leadership contest.
Just pause 1 second, because we've just had a tweet come in from Anna Turley, Labour Party chair, and it says, I'll just read it out, this difficult moment isn't about giving up, it's about stepping up. I'm proud of Keir Starmer, his record as a Labour PM and his leadership. I support him to deliver the ambition he set out this morning to bring hope and opportunity to the country. Sam, what's your reaction to that and the fact that it's landed just now? What do you make of it?
So Anna Turley is chair of the Labour Party, not a household name, and her tweet, her post on social media, 6 sort of floating freestanding. There aren't messages of support from every single other 25 members of the cabinet. Just one of the newest, most low-profile figures has taken to social media. But where is Yvette Cooper, the Foreign Secretary, who I'm told has cancelled her foreign travel, hunkered down in the Foreign Office to deal with this crisis? Where is Shabana Mahmood, the Home Secretary, not without ambition herself, who has been conspicuously silent over the last 24 hours or so. I could go on, but we know that in private, so many of these cabinet ministers have doubt. Aisha will have heard it from their mouths themselves, and without wishing to give away confidences, it's all over the cabinet. It's an open secret.
Aisha?
Look, there's no getting away from it. There is a huge amount of despair and dismay, and I think people knew that themselves because they're picking it up on the doorstep. It's also worth saying that many cabinet ministers are sitting on pretty thin majorities in areas where they are likely to get knocked out at the next general election if things continue the way they're doing. I think it's really difficult for the cabinet as well because obviously there's a certain amount of self-interest involved. Nobody wants to sort of give up their nice job. That's a big factor as well. But I do think a tipping point has come, and they will, particularly those cabinet ministers where they have lost so many councillors. And we talked about this on Thursday night. What people don't realise about councillors, as well as doing important local work, they are the foot soldiers when it comes to a general election campaign. And I think a lot of cabinet ministers will also be looking down the track, and other MPs as well. We saw a real hollowing out of the Labour Party this weekend. And I think, I was speaking to people who had lost, I spoke to a council leader in Barnsley. He'd been leader of Barnsley Council for 30 years. And, he was quite restrained in what he said, but he didn't hold back. He said that Keir Starmer came up on the doorstep, and cabinet ministers know that. But what it all comes back to, as Sam has alluded to, as Beth has alluded to, there isn't one clear person that everybody can get behind. There's not one clear ideology or kind of vision that people can get behind.
Sam, you've been collating all the evidence about who has called for Keir Starmer's resignation. Just talk us through what you found out, who they are, what wings of the party they come from.
So if you look, we are now at 58 Labour MPs who have called for Keir Starmer to go, more than a dozen of them, many more than a dozen, just since his speech this morning. Look at some of the pictures on the wall of people. Now, you've got Catherine West who kicked it all off, but so many of those are, yes, of the hard left. Just look at whether it's Ian Lavery or John Trickett or Rachel Maskell, but plenty of the soft left as well, Simon Offer, who we heard from on Friday. If we just click over to the next page, you can see some of the other names, because then they start moving really across the spectrum. Fred Thomas, 2024 intake, you would have thought a loyalist until very recently. You look at Clive Betts, he's the most senior MP in the Labour Party in Parliament. You could never in a million years call him one of the usual suspects and a regular rebel. Josh Simons, yes, he left under a cloud, but he was head of Labour Together, the paramilitary organisation wing of Keir Starmer and Morgan McSweeney's project to get Keir Starmer into Downing Street. Chris Curtis, the head of the Growth Group, he is on the right of the Labour Party. So what you have seen is all ages and all ideological factions coming out, and there is no consistency. It's everyone.
And actually, while you've been talking, another has called, Rachel Taylor, MP for North Warwickshire and Bedworth, has called on Sir Keir Starmer to resign, so that takes the total to 59. Aisha, 81 would need to mount a leadership challenge, but it's quite difficult still to shift the Prime Minister, regardless of what you were saying about, there's not... it's now 60, actually, now have called for him to resign, so it's ticking up, isn't it? But I'm not far off that sort of 81 magic figure, but it's not so simple as that, is it?
No, it certainly isn't. I mean, once you get to the 81 number, that is enough to trigger a contest into which the sitting Prime Minister would automatically be on the ballot paper, and then it would be opened up to other candidates that wanted to come forward, and they'd have to get a certain threshold to get onto the ballot paper. And it isn't clear right now. Remember, Andy Burnham is not even on the pitch yet because he is still not an MP. He may not be by the time, if there is a leadership contest. It's still not clear, if it goes out to party members, what party members could do. I mean, there is every chance that Keir Starmer could potentially win this. Party members might think, well, actually, he is the guy that got us into power after 14 years.
And he made clear this morning that he would stand in any contest.
And it's worth remembering that when Owen Smith challenged Jeremy Corbyn back in the day, and he, everyone kind of coalesced around him, Jeremy Corbyn still won. So there's still a long way for this to go. The ideal scenario is if The Prime Minister himself says, I will set out a timeline, and there's a more orderly transition, and there isn't a very messy, bruising leadership contest, but we're a long way from that.
Right. Well, earlier I spoke to the Culture Secretary, Lisa Nandy, in the aftermath of the Prime Minister's speech before the latest batch of calls for Sir Keir to go. Lisa Nandy, was that it? Was that enough for Keir Starmer to safeguard his job?
Well, no, it's not enough to go out and make a speech, but it is certainly the right thing to have done in this moment, to go out and acknowledge the mistakes that have been made, to acknowledge the role that he's personally played in that and the frustration that is quite personal that has been levelled towards him, and to acknowledge that we haven't been big enough to meet the moment and the scale of change that is required for people's lives. I think it was an important step, but as he said rightly, what happens next is most important. So going forwards, what you're going to see from this Labour government is a Prime Minister who will go out and wear his heart on his sleeve, who will show that he is prepared to go out and fight any system that stands in the way of making people's lives better, and take on the big change that is necessary, not just the incremental change, with an urgency and a pace that shows people that we're on their side and that things can get better.
So, Lisa, you're saying it's not enough. So it sounds to me as if he's somewhat on probation with members of the Cabinet.
No, not at all. I'm on your show, Cathy, because I need him to succeed. I want him to succeed. And I'm working very closely with him to make sure that he does. And I think that is a view that actually is reflected across a lot of the Cabinet and a lot of the Parliamentary Labour Party. We've made mistakes in government. That's on all of us. It's right to go out and own that. And he was able to point to successes as well in today's speech, but the recognition that people have waited a long time for their lives to get better and easier, that the levels of frustration that we've been seeing on doorsteps, the length and breadth of this country, about needing a government that is prepared to take the steps that will genuinely turn their lives around. I think it's absolutely right that he's gone out and acknowledged that. And now we set to work to make sure that we deliver on that promise.
One of Keir Starmer's solutions to those problems that you've just set out is to bring the UK closer to the EU. But I wonder why he doesn't make it clearer, explicit even, that he's going to rip up his red lines on rejoining the customs union and the single market. Is that something you would like to see being debated at least in the run-up to the general election, or do you worry that that's a gift to reform?
No, I actually think that's just a sort of fundamental misunderstanding, both of the government's position but also of the EU's position as well. I don't think anyone in this country wants to reopen the Brexit debate. We had a referendum. That referendum was won by Leave. Majority of people voted for it. But it has been a real disaster for a lot of people in this country. I talked to any small or medium-sized business in my constituency, and the deal that we got when we left the European Union has erected needless barriers in their way of being able to trade, to provide good jobs, of opportunities for young people. And on security and defence, it's just meant that we're just not in the room often when we're having discussions about how we collectively take on the threats that we face.
But you're happy
the Prime
with the
Minister
red
is right to say
remaining?
the answer is a closer relationship with Europe. And look, that's not necessarily the most palatable message for everybody in the country. But one of the things he was saying in this speech today is, I will never lie to you. I will always level with you as a country, and I will not hesitate to do what is right in order to turn around people's lives.
And you're happy with the red lines remaining?
Well, there's no appetite, either from the government, from Europe, or from the public, I think, to start getting into renegotiating things like free movement, single market access. We went round that track for years during the Brexit wars. Right. And this country doesn't need any more division. What it needs is serious politicians who roll up their sleeves and go out and fight for the change that will actually make a difference in people's lives.
Well, some of your colleagues disagree with you on that, but I'm sure you'll be having that debate between now and the election. You talk about serious people, serious politicians. Let's talk about your friend, the Manchester mayor, who Keir Starmer sort of hinted today he wouldn't have a problem if the NEC decided to let Andy Burnham back to Westminster. He wouldn't have a problem with it. Do you still think that Andy Burnham would be an asset in Westminster?
Yeah, I do. I mean, he's an asset as the Mayor of Greater Manchester, and he was as my neighbouring MP in Leith for 7 years when I first got elected. I think he'd be an asset in Westminster too. And I said at the time when the NEC blocked him from standing in Gorton and Denton that I thought that was a mistake. I think you need your strongest team on the pitch, and he is undeniably one of those politicians who goes out and fights for people, and people see it and appreciate it. In the north of England, we remember very much that at the moment when we were most struggling during the pandemic, when the Tory government refused to properly compensate us for that and to treat us fairly like other parts of the country, that he went out and fought for us. And I think that is the sort of politician that we need in these times. I think you saw that from the Prime Minister today, and I think that we need to be a strong and united team. We have a Prime Minister. This is not about trying to swap out the Prime Minister or change the Prime Minister, but I do think we need to stick together as a team, come together as a team, field our strongest players and go out and make that change that people were promised and that we owe it to them to deliver.
So Keir Starmer should have the confidence, really, to welcome Andy Burnham back to Westminster in time.
Well, look, as far as I understand it, and Andy's my mayor, so I speak to him a lot, and I speak to Keir a lot as my Prime Minister in whose cabinet I serve. As far as I understand it, they speak often and they have a good relationship. So I don't think this is quite as is being characterised in the media. But I've made my view clear. I think having the strongest team is the best approach, and it's an approach that I've seen the Prime Minister take many times before, but it's not up to me. It's up to the Labour's ruling body, the National Executive Committee, to make a decision, even when a vacancy arises for Andy to stand for Parliament.
Well, that's the scene in Downing Street. Looks quiet for now, but we'll keep you updated of any comings and goings. It looks like there might be quite a few comings and goings tomorrow, if not tonight. And you can't but help imagine what's going through the Prime Minister's mind as he perhaps works in his study tonight. But let's speak to the Labour MP and Chair of the Work and Pensions Select Committee, Debbie Abrahams, now. We are now seeing 60 MPs calling for the Prime Minister to quit. Are you going to make it 61?
I already on the BBC on Saturday said that I thought that the Prime Minister should set out an orderly transition. I was giving him to the end of the year, so I'm sorry that I didn't make your 60 on the board there, Cathy. But I've already made that remark.
You were slightly ambiguous though at the weekend. I mean, just to be clear, you want the Prime Minister now to set out a timetable for transition to a different leader in the autumn. Can you just be clear about the timing of this?
Yes, I think in order not to spook the markets, to make sure that we can do as much as we can to de-escalate the tensions in the Middle East, it is right that it has to be orderly. It shouldn't be something that's a snap resignation from the Prime Minister. That would be wrong. And he's doing some very good work in that regard. Pardon?
But you want him to make clear now that he is going to be going in the autumn?
Yes, I would like him to make his intention, though, for him to own it, really, to give him some dignity so that he can set out the transition and to, as I say, to step down in the autumn.
And do you have a replacement in mind? Because, you know, what a lot of people are saying is, well, it's all well and good firing the starting gun on this leadership contest, but actually there's no sort of clear candidate. There are problems with each of the candidates for one reason or another. But do you have someone in mind who would do a better job?
I will sort of make those views known. I think it is right what Lisa was saying before in terms of making sure that Andy does have a route in. We need to make sure that we, as she said, have all the best players on the pitch, and we know that Andy is regarded across the country as somebody that can unify, but also is an outstanding politician and is somebody that people could get behind. So from that point of view, definitely.
So you'd like to see Andy Burnham on the ballot paper for sure in a forthcoming leadership contest?
I would very much like him back in Parliament, and then it's up to my colleagues. I would certainly, if he was there, I would certainly be supporting him.
And I mean, when you listened to the Prime Minister's speech this morning, did that not reassure you that, you know, he said he gets it, he's going to bring change more rapidly?
I have huge regard for the Prime Minister. I know him, and I'm sorry that the decent, honourable man that he is hasn't come across to the public at large. And as I say, he has done some exceptional things, but we have made some mistakes. We made mistakes in the first year, and people haven't forgotten those. And the good things that we have done latterly that are coming through this year, people haven't had time to recognise. And I think, unfortunately, that means that it is very, very difficult to row back from that position. People have made up their mind. They're not listening. They've lost a bit of confidence. And from that point of view, my sights are on 2029, a general election, and who we want in power. And I know who I would like to see still in number 10.
Right, OK. So, but I mean, you haven't been clear about who you would like to replace Keir Starmer.
I said that I would, if Andy's in Parliament, I would be supporting.
Right, OK, got it. So, I mean, the point is that if you do switch the leadership now, there will be enormous pressure. We've just heard it on the sofa here in the studio from Nadhim Zahawi, who's now with Reform, was with the Conservatives. There'll be enormous pressure for a general election. So you're not going to have the luxury of waiting until 2029, are you?
Well, I'm sure that whoever does become the new leader, as and when hopefully that the Prime Minister announces his departure, then that would that we would still be standing on the Labour manifesto that we put out in 2024. It's a question for me about that being absolutely clear about our values, making sure that they're sort of front and centre in all that we do. About making sure that we recognise where people are. And I don't think that was done, particularly in the first year. And as I say, the damage around that was done. We really do need to put the country first in all that we do. And I sometimes think that we didn't do that, or it wasn't obvious what we were trying to do.
But you mentioned the markets a while back. I mean, Number 10's line is that triggering a leadership contest now, or even in the autumn, ends up just prolonging the psychodrama, and that will unsettle the markets.
So, and that's why it needs to be an orderly transition, Cathy. I listened to Jim O'Neill earlier on, and he was saying that, yes, at the moment they are a little bit jittery, but if something was set out very clearly, and as I say, it was an orderly transition, the markets are also concerned about what could, given where we are from the elections on Thursday, what could be coming down the track. And we need to recognise that and act accordingly.
Debbie Abrahams, thank you very much for joining us with that take. And that does bring our tally here on Sky News to 61 MPs now calling for the Prime Minister to resign. We hadn't initially had Debbie Abrahams on our list because it was slightly ambiguous at the weekend what her position was, but we've now nailed that down. Sam, so there you go, another one.
That's right. And look, I thought that Debbie Abrahams brought up sort of two of the biggest issues for me. First of all, she's talking about an orderly transition after a September contest. It's May, Cathy. That's ages away. We have international conflict, rising inflation, domestic challenges like you haven't seen. We are 36 hours away from a King's speech that presumably goes in the bin if we've got a lame duck Prime Minister at the point which King Charles turns up to deliver it. A sense of drift across the country as the Labour Party battles it out for months. Because, by the way, until this is completely concluded, the sniping, the fighting, the factions are only going to increase, not decrease, is extraordinary. The idea that the markets are going to sit back and go, well, I'll just wait for you 40,000 Labour members or 80,000 Labour members to pick between the moderate candidate and the left candidate that's promising more nationalisations, potentially more spending, and we're going to be completely sanguine about it when we don't know who's got control of what, is for the birds. There's a lot of chaos in what is implied in the Labour Party plan.
I want to come back to you on some other bits that Debbie Abrahams got into, but let's bring in Nadhim here, former Chancellor.
Yep.
What do you think the markets would make of another Prime Minister?
Well, the markets have already made the United Kingdom an outlier because of what Rachel Reeves has done in damaging the economy. You look at where borrowing is at.
Well, there's also the Tories contributed to that.
I don't disagree with you, but actually borrowing was at a lower rate when we got rid of Liz Truss. I think Sam's absolutely right. I don't think the market would look positively on 4 months of chaos. I also think that as the Conservative Party did and trashed the brand, Labour are doing exactly the same. They're trashing it. You know, if you are tonight watching us here at home and you're having to pay your mortgage, pay your utility bills, right, try and hold on to a job, try and get your kids through school, right, all these things, and you're watching Wes Streeting and Andy Burnham and Angela Rayner and a bunch of other MPs doing this, and a Prime Minister who's just not up to the job, right?
Yeah, but Reform quite wants him to stay in post.
Then you are in a very negative place, right? That's the reality. If you're a small business wanting to invest, you won't invest. If you're looking at investing in the UK, you won't invest. It's why we need a general election. All I would say is I think the country will not forgive Labour in the way they're not forgiving the Conservatives. I don't think we disagree on that, Aisha, do we?
Well, they certainly haven't forgiven the Conservatives.
Correct.
They certainly haven't, of which you were a huge part
I don't,
of.
and you and I did this on election night.
We did. But maybe some people didn't see that. But look, you can't have it both ways, because on Thursday night you were saying the public are rejecting Labour, and that is true. The public were rejecting Labour.
That's why we need an election.
Well, hang on a minute. You're not going to get an election because the Labour government, and we went through this on Thursday night, Nadeem. And
Put country before party.
Don't embarrass yourself.
Go for an election.
Do not embarrass yourself
country
again by
before
going through this, right?
Aisha. Put
You're not
country
even
before party.
in Parliament. You're not even in Parliament. So
Thank you for the insult.
Pipe down.
Thank you for the insult. The nation is watching. Just like you insulted Reform voters by saying that we're dangerous. No, your leader has. Your Prime Minister said that we're racist and dangerous.
Well,
Nadeem,
I'm going to bring up anti-Semitism in a minute. I've got some tweets to put to you.
But the point is, all of this stuff, all of this is... Honestly, calm down, right? Basically, none of this, of course, looks great, but what is the definition of insanity? Just carrying on and expecting to get a different result. Many people voted for the Labour Party and they want change. They're really disappointed that they haven't got the change. And for whatever reason, whether it's fair or not, Keir Starmer is not connecting with people on the doorstep. So the decision that, and who knows where this may end up, but I thought that was actually quite a moving interview with Deb. I mean, it wasn't glee and, joy in her voice. She sounded incredibly upset about where things are. And I don't think any Labour MP who has made the decision to come out tonight will have done it with any sort of joy. They'll have done it with an incredibly heavy heart. We always remember that, the elation that we felt just under two years ago. So this is incredibly serious stuff. But ultimately, as Keir Starmer said himself today, we want to be a party in power. And if we think that we are basically staring a defeat down the barrel of the lens, if you don't make the effort to correct in enough time, then people will not forgive you down the track either.
Sam, just to round off on Debbie Abrahams is obviously a supporter of Andy Burnham. Lisa Nandy is also a chum of Andy Burnham. Interesting hearing their thoughts. And Debbie Abrahams talking about this sort of long, orderly transition. Obviously, that benefits Andy Burnham, doesn't it? Because he's not in Parliament at the moment. But there is this moment, as Aisha was reflecting on earlier, for Wes Streeting to strike. Do you think, knowing Wes as you do you think he's got the kind of brutality, the sort of sheer... I mean, he said how ambitious he is. He's been public about that. But do you think he's got the guts to do this?
Yes, absolutely yes. I think it's a question of whether it's the right tactics. I think what they will be weighing up is whether it'll work, not whether he wants to have the top job. Like, bluntly, he thinks it's the job he's wanted all his life. He's going to go all out. I think the calculation is not about whether or not he's brave enough. But the challenge for Wes and the challenge for Andy is they will present themselves as different figures in a contest, but they will both have the same almost nil amount of money to spend. Yeah. They will both have the same parliamentary majority with its red lines. They will both be competing to become Prime Minister to serve under a manifesto that hasn't changed just because the Prime Minister has. I am not sure, for all the hope of the Labour Party, for those who are pinning change of Prime Minister on a better future, it is not clear to me much changes.
I think that's a fair point. I think that's a very, very fair point. And as I was saying on Thursday night, just changing the face is not the panacea to all of this. There's a big different, but communication does matter, right? Politics is the art of communication. And if there is somebody who isn't connecting with people and you have a chance, Wes Streeting is a gifted, I'd say out of everyone in politics, he is the most gifted communicator that we have right now.
OK, well, we'll discuss this much more. This programme is being extended for several hours, I think until 10 p.m. So let's now think of something a little bit different but connected, because the build-up to polling day last week was dominated by the anti-Semitic attacks in Golders Green and the response to it from political leaders. And just a little earlier, I spoke to author and comedian David Baddiel. You can watch the full interview where I talked to him about that on YouTube. But given the febrile atmosphere around the Labour Party tonight, he also had some interesting thoughts on the plight of Sir Keir Starmer. I mean, you sort of fell out of love with Labour over anti-Semitism. You've been a long-standing Labour supporter in the past. Could you bring yourself to vote Labour at these elections?
I did vote Labour at these elections, partly because, you know, when faced with the ballot, I thought they still seem the best of a not great bunch, although that's really unfair to particular candidates who I know very little about in my own community.
But the least worst option.
Yeah, I mean... Well, I mean, this is a whole other discussion, but one of the things I think at the moment, which is obviously today with Keir Starmer and all the rest of it, is I think that, again, sorry to harp on about social media, but we also live in a time where a perfectly adequate, I mean, not out the park amazing and not that charismatic, but kind of adequate man who, like, in the 70s would be Jim Callaghan or whatever, and no one would be hating him. They might not be thinking he was great, but no one would think he was the worst thing that ever happened to politics, is considered that. And there are calls for him to go and everyone's... And I don't know that we can carry on with this, whereby it's a bit like what's happening in football, whereby a manager has to go and everyone hates them if they haven't had immense success within 5 games or whatever. And culture has got speeded up, is what I'm saying, and also extremed, so that kind of a normal bloke who's OK, who often... or a normal woman who's OK, who often is the person who's going to lead the country, is not good enough anymore.
Do you almost feel sorry for him, then?
Yeah, I sort of do feel sorry for him, yeah. I mean, I'm sure he doesn't want my pity. That isn't going to be great for Keir Starmer.
Even though he's an Arsenal fan?
Well, he is an Arsenal fan, so he has no pity from that point of view. But I don't... Keir Starmer, from the point of view of, you know, he has tried to combat anti-Semitism. I know a lot of Jews feel the government hasn't done enough and all that. As I say, for me, it's not something you can fix that easily with a lot of draconian, top-down free speech or, you know, this march can't happen restrictions. I don't think that's the way you do it.
But you talked about people, you know, calling for a manager's head or calling for the Prime Minister's head. Do you think we're in a kind of state of perma-crisis now where essentially Britain is becoming ungovernable?
Yeah, I don't think it's just Britain, though. I mean, I think Britain seems to be... We live in Britain, so we're more aware of it, but I think lots of countries suffer from it because lots of countries are at the behest of social media. The rise of populism is amazing. It's so quick. You know, America is kind of slightly ungovernable, it seems to me. I think Britain used to consider itself like we are a sort of haven of maybe slightly dull stability. Yeah. And we would look at countries like Italy or whatever and think, oh, they're in permanent crisis and constantly having, you know, prime presidents changing or whatever. But now it's not like that here. And I think all these ideas of what Britishness is politically are no longer things that we can expect or as a default.
Well, let's bring in Labour MP for Clapham, Brixton Hill, Bell Ribeiro-Addy, who said that the Prime Minister must resign. And, Bell, you tweeted earlier that it's clear that the Prime Minister doesn't have a credible plan. He must now set out a timetable for departure. What brought you to that conclusion?
Well, the speech today didn't really have anything new in it. The one thing I would definitely agree on was that we're not going to get further by trying to be any different party. We're going to have to do that by being more Labour. But I think we perhaps have a very different idea of what being more Labour is, given the policies that have come out over the past 2 years and how, you know, the public has reacted to them. But I think what really did it for me was on the day of the election, where a lot of our local candidates, hardworking councillors that have been there for years, some of them doing a lot in our local communities, some of them were, they were beaten quite badly in terms of the result. And it wasn't through any fault of their own. But on that day, when we should have been talking about them, when we should have been talking about the great work that Labour does when it is in power locally, the message coming from number 10 was, I'm not going anywhere. And I'm sick and tired, I think, and this is what's brought me, I'm sick and tired of us having a constant debate about one man's job, when there are so many things going on right across the country and so many things that our constituents are going through. It's become a distraction and it has to end.
You think he's being selfish?
I think this whole debate is selfish at this point in time. It's clear he's lost the confidence of the PLP, of the country, and without both of those, you can't effectively govern. If the conversation every day is whether or not one man is going to keep his job, then we are not doing what we set out for in government, and this whole melodrama has to come to an end.
I mean, you've never been one of the Prime Minister's biggest fans, is that fair to say?
I think I've never been a fan of the policies that we've put out. I've always made it a point...
You're on the left of the party.
I'm on the left of the party, and I've always made it a point not to be personal. I respect the fact that he was elected as a Prime Minister. I respect the fact that he was elected by the members of our party. That is very,
But have you
very
just
key.
spied your opportunity, is my point?
No, I don't think I have. This is the first time I've said it, but it's because we've been brought to a point where chance after chance has been squandered. We have a huge majority in Parliament. You have to remember that huge majority wasn't actually won by a popular vote. We got 3 million less votes than we did in 2017 and 500,000 less votes than we did in 2019. So we already had an issue, but we had a huge majority for which we have now squandered with mistake after mistake, all of these different U-turns, all these different things that have created a lack of confidence in the country and led to us losing some of our amazing councillors. So the reality of the situation is that it's crunch time and it has to end.
Aisha was saying earlier on the sofa that, the problem is there isn't a clear candidate to replace him. Can you put her right? Do you feel there is someone street
No, I completely agree. There's not a clear candidate to replace him, which is probably why I haven't said anything sooner. There isn't a clear candidate to replace him, but also the system is flawed. We changed our procedures a while back, our rules as to how somebody could go about becoming the leader of the party, and the threshold has completely changed. In this era of factions, in which unfortunately this particular leadership has brought in, the threshold was doubled. It was doubled, so actually somebody on the left of the party couldn't actually probably put themselves forward to put themselves to the membership. And that makes a massive difference. We know that if you put certain MPs to the membership, perhaps, they might win. And that's been something that has been changed by this particular issue. So it's not
you want a left-wing candidate? It could be all people of the left standing, if you look at it at the moment, apart from Wes Streeting.
Who is on the left? That would be my question.
Presumably you're enthusiastic about Angela Rayner, possibly?
I'm in the Socialist campaign group, and that's completely different. I think it's very difficult at this moment for us to paint anybody who's been in the cabinet as part of the left, when a lot of people will see them as complicit in what has happened over these past couple of years. So they would have to come with a very, very good argument as to why they should be now viewed as a left candidate.
Let me just bring in Aisha here. I mean, it seems inevitable, doesn't it, that the party now is shifting to the left, whoever is Prime Minister, under Keir Starmer, if he stays, or whoever replaces him.
I probably wouldn't see it as a kind of bland left-right thing, because I think it is a mistake just to think about the Labour Party in those terms. In fact, Nigel Farage was saying, it's you shouldn't be looking at politics whether it's left or right. It's basically, what are the big structural problems facing this country? Massively, the economy, cost of living, NHS, immigration, crime, antisocial behaviour, those things that we know. I'm in Bell's constituency. These are the big kind of pressures that people are facing. And it's about the Labour Party, I think, not being afraid about having debate and discussion as well. It isn't that you just stick to one bit of ideology or orthodoxy. It's what are the right policies for different problems facing the country.
Bell, I mean, the problem with that is that the markets, as we were talking about earlier, are not going to tolerate a sort of sustained debate about the future of the Labour Party and who should lead it at a time of economic crisis, at a time of, we're at war, we've got the threat from Russia. You haven't got the luxury of having this debate, have you?
No, I don't think we do have the luxury of having this debate, which is why I'm saying something now. I think it's, as it is, a huge distraction hugely damaging when those of us who are MPs and those councillors, including those that lost their roles, just want to get on with doing our job. As I said, we have one of the largest majorities ever. There is so much that we could have done, but we have squandered that opportunity with policies that, quite frankly, even our members don't agree with. I'm thinking about, well, obviously now we've U-turned on the two-child benefit cap. Some MPs lost their the whip because of that. The winter fuel allowance, again, the welfare cuts, and I hear that we're bringing them back. I mean, I think about what was said in the speech today, and looking at an outline of what's going to be in the King's speech, and I'm like, has anybody really listened to?
Well, I mean, he shifted on Europe today, didn't he?
I mean, but that's things that we've heard before. Again, there was nothing new. And actually, how much of a difference is it going to make? I thought it was a huge mistake that we left the European Union. I was the only Labour MP to vote completely against the bill. Some of my colleagues abstained, but I was the only one to vote against it. And I believe I was proven right. It has been economically disastrous for our country. So, yes, it seems that those things are right. But in terms of going further and faster on the EU, that doesn't sound like it's happening.
And yeah, so let's just pause there, because I want to come back to you in a sec to just disentangle some of the things we've been talking about and bring our panellists back in as well. It is now 8 o'clock, if you're just joining us. 3 junior members of the government have resigned, calling for Sir Keir Starmer to stand down as Prime Minister after those crushing election results for the party last week. They're ministerial aides, not cabinet members, but their move adds to the growing pressure on the Prime Minister. Right now, we're up to 63 MPs and counting, calling for him to go. We'll bring you all the latest from Number 10, where an increasingly isolated and lonely Prime Minister is hunkered down at the moment. But let's go back now to Bell, Ribeiro-Addy. You've just come out and said that you are one of those 63 now Labour MPs who are calling for him to resign. Sounds to me, from what you're saying, it's more in sorrow than in anger.
Well, nobody wants a situation where we actually ask for our Prime Minister to resign. We're not near a general election. It's a huge thing for people to do. But the fact that we are debating it at the moment shows how serious it is and how much members of Parliament, Labour members of Parliament, believe that if we don't change course, we're headed for disaster. And some of that disaster showed itself in our local election results. I don't think there's anybody that is enjoying this. I'm certainly not enjoying it. We've faced so many difficulties over the past couple of months convincing people that Labour is still the party for them. This is not fun for anybody, regardless of what wing of the party they were on or whether or not they supported Keir in the first place. This is about our survival. And as I said, when Labour wins, when we put forward those core Labour policies, those ones that have fundamentally changed the country over decades, those are the things that people want to see. When we do that, when Labour win, people win. But at the moment, we are losing.
Give me an example of some of those core Labour policies you would like a new leader to bring in urgently?
Well, for example, I think it's been a mistake that we haven't gone more in on taxing the wealthy. I think nationalisation of some of our public services would definitely be something that people want to see. I think about what's happening with Thames Water at the moment and other public services where people are having to pay through the nose for services that there aren't much competition on, and the government always seem to be bailing out. Things like that. Those are core Labour policies. Right. There are some great things that we have done, but even those are being overshadowed by a debate about whether or not the Prime Minister gets to keep his job.
Nadeem Zahawi, you were former Chancellor. What do you make of what you've just heard about nationalisation and taxing the wealthy higher?
Well, I think just listening to Bell, it sort of feels pretty tragic that Labour's ended up where it's ended up. But, one question I thought of really putting to you, Bell, is Shabana Mahmood, obviously one of the leading candidates, and she's come up with reforms to indefinite leave to remain to try and deal with migrants.
Those are not in line with core Labour values, in my personal opinion.
So you'd vote against that?
Absolutely. I would.
Herein lies the problem for Keir Starmer. The reason that he's toast tonight is that the Labour Party just does not prioritise where the nation is at in my view, and that's the real problem.
So I don't believe that the biggest problem in our country is people that have come here to work in our public services largely overall and who are contributing by paying taxes. I don't believe
but you don't think we should control, shouldn't be automatic that people get indefinite leave to remain?
The thing is, it's never been automatic that people get... I mean, I'm not sure how much immigration casework you did when you were a member of...
I did quite a lot.
I'm not sure how much immigration casework you did when you were a member of Parliament.
I did quite... Okay. I was 14 years in Parliament, so...
OK, fair enough. That's more than my 7. I don't know where... what I would say is that, quite specifically, there is not this situation where immigration is completely uncontrolled.
And where are you on illegal migration? We're at 200,000 illegal migrants now in the country.
What I'm trying to say... Where
do you think you would be where Shabana is compared to that?
In terms of what they're doing with...
she needs to stamp down...
Thank you.
I'm asking. Forgive me.
Listen, I do understand that we have an issue with people crossing the channel, but the way in which we deal with that is to create safe and legal routes. And if we did that, we wouldn't have the problem we're having at the moment. And that could be by having processing centres on the other side of the channel, something that we have had before. And things such as that. But the idea that we criminalise people once they come here when they're seeking safety, again, is not in line with our core Labour values. I'm not ashamed...
You don't see that the Labour Home Secretary as representing what you want?
Not in terms of those immigration policies, absolutely not. I mean, there are more humane ways to deal with immigration, and at the moment, some of the things that are being put forward, as far as I'm concerned, aren't in line with our values. We are not unfair we do not claim to be unfair as a Labour Party in the way in which we deal with people, particularly those who are seeking safety, and particularly those who have a legal right to be here. Those who have indefinite leave to remain have come here through these so-called legal routes that people say they should be coming through. They're doing everything that they are meant to do. They are paying through the nose in terms of fees, and they're being treated like rubbish.
Aisha, let me just bring in Aisha here, because this is where if there is a contest brewing, which it does appear to be, this is where it's going, isn't it, in terms of the heart and soul of the Labour Party and where it stands vis-à-vis the country?
Well, these are big debates that need to be had in the party, and I think we can't shy away from that. And I think, we shouldn't have a situation where I feel as a party we've slightly denuded ourselves of the ability to have nuanced, difficult policy discussions. And if you look at what's happening across the country, yes, in London, Labour has lost votes because people do not like a rabidly sort of harsh immigration policy. But in the north, immigration is a really, really big issue. Right. So Labour is going to have to find a balanced approach to this.
OK. Thank you very much, Belle Ribeiro-Addy, for your contributions tonight. And thank you again to Sofa guests. You're going to stay with us. Of course, we're keeping a close eye on the comings and goings in Downing Street tonight. Our chief political correspondent, John Craig, is there. John, it's all kicking off, really, isn't it?
Yeah, the latest from here is they're sending out for pizzas or some form of takeaway food. The Last Supper, perhaps? No, not quite yet. But obviously there is a mood of crisis here inside 10 Downing Street as these numbers of MPs calling for Sir Keir Starmer to quit creeps towards the magic 81 figure. It's over 60 now, including 4 junior members of the government, the bag carriers, the parliamentary private secretaries. 4 of them have quit. One other has PPSs. One other has criticised the PM, said he should go, but has not yet quit. Let me just recap who they are. Tom Rutland. He's a bag carrier to Environment Secretary Emma Reynolds. Joe Morris, PPS to Wes Streeting. Yes, Wes Streeting, almost certain to enter the race for the Labour leadership if and when there's a contest. Next, now Shabana Khan. She is a PPS at the Cabinet Office. Melanie Ward, Scottish MP, a PPS to David Lammy, the Deputy Prime Minister. And then Sally Jameson, who is a PPS at the Home Office, has said he should go, but has not yet quit the government. This is it's becoming like, previous resignations, prime ministers forced from office that we've seen so many times over the years. I remember lots of PPSs quitting, for example, going back to when Gordon Brown supporters forced Tony Blair to declare when he was going to go. Just to remind you what happened then, it was October 2006 when a group of Brownite plotters led by Tom Watson met for a curry in a Balti house in Wolverhampton and hatched a plot to force Tony Blair out. How were they rumbled? Well, they signed the visitors' book when they left the restaurant, so we know that they were there. I well remember, I was listening to Beth Rigby a little earlier talking about the cabinet turning on the Prime Minister one by one. That's what happened to Margaret Thatcher in 1919. Now, the difference was Parliament was sitting then and they all went into the Prime Minister's room in the House of Commons, and one by one, big figures like Kenneth Clarke and others told her the game was up. And so that came, of course, after she'd narrowly won the first ballot in the leadership election. So all eyes, as Beth was saying earlier on what the Cabinet does next. They're due to meet here tomorrow morning. Will they all go in and see the PM before the meeting, or will they confront him at that meeting? But where we are tonight is that the numbers are creeping up towards 81, and some junior members of the government are quitting. The beginning of the end? Well, it looks like it.
Well, thanks very much, John, for that. Sam is still on the sofa here in the studio, along with Nadeem and Aisha. Sam, beginning of the end, is that your take?
I mean, it's starting to feel like the momentum is it's going to be very hard to pull back from that. The Mirror's reporting that Catherine West got her 80 signatories to a plan for a leadership contest in the autumn, by September is her most sort of latest plan. Look, the problem for the Prime Minister is that once you call for him to go, you can't withdraw that call. So, you know, I think at this point he is approaching lame duck status. The point about 81 MPs opposing him is not just that under the rules that's the number who, if they backed a challenger, could take on the Prime Minister. It's also basically the number that if they voted with the opposition would wash away the Labour Party's majority in the Commons. So there's a double significance of there being 80 or more rebels. You just can't get legislation through once 80 MPs or more are doing it. But listen, there's a really weird bit of choreography over the next 48 hours. John Craig, Beth Rigby, absolutely right. Tomorrow morning, the crunch point is the Cabinet meeting. Could there be something seismic that happens at that? But the next day, King Charles comes down the Mall and delivers the King's speech, which is the announcement of the government's agenda for the whole of the next Parliament. Now, that agenda could well be out of date at the moment that the King delivers it. Now, everyone will try and pretend that this is perfectly normal behaviour, but the bottom line is politicians right now could be on course to embarrass the King in a matter of 36 hours by defenestrating a Prime Minister. Now, if the King doesn't deliver the King's speech, then Parliament won't open. So I suspect it'll happen. But everybody...
I've hired my ermine for the day.
Well, you might need to unhire it.
Well, exactly. So you have this spectre. But more seriously, you know, that's a moment where the government agenda was meant to be spelled out, but we are then putting ourselves effectively with politics on pause for months while the Labour Party, with the best will in the world, navel-gazes at a point where there's lots and lots of challenges.
Pause for a second, because we've got someone waiting down the line. And just to recap on what Sam was alluding to there, Melanie Ward has resigned as Parliamentary Private Secretary to David Lammy and has called for Sir Keir Starmer to resign as Labour leader. So I think that takes it to 63 Labour MPs now calling for Sir Keir Starmer to resign. We're joined now by the Labour MP Rachel Maskell, who has also called for the Prime Minister to resign previously. Rachel, the issue now, it's snowballing, isn't it? But we were hearing there, you know, we've got the King's speech planned, you've got an economic crisis, there's a war going on, several wars around the world. This is going to spook the markets big time and make the perilous situation we're in even worse.
Well, first of all, it's a very sad day, and it was a devastating night on the 7th of May. And of course, it is really important that we find our way through that. And that's why I have called for not only a mature conversation, we need cool heads at this time. I think we saw the kind of hot heads over the weekend where people were saying we've got to do something, but not quite clear what. But also we need to ensure that there is stability. And the best way to get that stability is to announce a timetable as to how we move forward, how we ensure that we've got that process going forward. But first we need that in-depth conversation to draw our party together to determine what is the right qualities we're looking for, but also the right person who can not only unite our communities but unite our country. That is the task at hand for the forthcoming leadership election, to demonstrate that you actually understand the breadth that is needed. Keir Starmer has been a very narrowing Prime Minister who listens to very few, and I think that has been really the seed of his downfall, is that he hasn't engaged, he's got things wrong, he made the wrong choices, and he still hasn't engaged with his backbenchers. So I think somebody who understands the breadth of our movement is going to be absolutely crucial to take us into this next chapter of Labour's history.
So, Rachel, just name a few people who do have those qualities you're talking about.
I've been talking about Andy Burnham. I recognise he's not in Westminster. We are all having this discussion. We want Andy. How do we do that? He's not in Westminster. He needs a seat. If he needs a seat, then it causes a by-election. It is a challenging situation. That's why we need cool minds, because whoever that is, and we've got a movement of so much talent, whether in Parliament, in the trade unions, and of course mayors and other leaders across the country. And I think we need to get the right person at this time, because the threat before us is that in 3 years' time we could see Nigel Farage walking into Downing Street, and that will be devastating, not only because of the policy tasks he set out, but we know his only interest is himself, and we need a government which is interested in everyone in the country. And of course Labour it's been doing some fantastic things that hasn't kind of reached across: the Renters' Rights Bill, the Employment Rights Bill, and we need more. But today I was listening really carefully to the Prime Minister. The two things I expected was, one, him to talk about the culture of politics. He didn't address that issue, which is the issue on the doorstep, and also the economic orthodoxy, which again didn't come forward, which is really at the root of what a change in government actually means. The Prime Minister didn't step up to the mark today.
I want to come back to the economic orthodoxy, as you put it, but I just also want to just pick you up on what you said about Andy Burnham, because if he quits as Manchester Mayor, there is no guarantee that Labour will put another mayor in place in Manchester. It could well go to reform. And then, of course, he's got to win a by-election. There's no guarantee that he'll win a by-election. I mean, it would just be a mess, wouldn't it?
Difficult, and that's why we need honesty all around, and to ensure that we've got the team, not just the person, that can do things. I think Andy could be serving in perhaps some other capacity if he can't come into Parliament, but let's see what is possible, and therefore rule nothing out at this point. And that's why I don't think we need sudden resignation, timetable tomorrow. I really do think we need cool heads at this time, because what I want to see is a leader to take us forward together.
With your cool head on, you're a big fan of Andy Burnham, clearly. Would you sacrifice your seat for him?
He hasn't got roots in Yorkshire, and I don't think that would be fair. I mean, I really do think, he is so... Manchester is running through his veins, isn't it? So I do think it needs to be over in the northwest, where he is from, where he is rooted, and where he's passionate about.
But there are MPs representing the northwest who are having those conversations tonight about whether one of them could step down for him.
I don't know that detail.
Well, let me just come back to what you said about the economic orthodoxy, because we had Bell Ribeiro-Addy on the show just a few minutes ago talking about the need for higher taxes on the very wealthy. Is that where you're looking for a policy change too?
We have to recognise that we are the second most inequitable country across our world, and that has grown and grown over a period of time. And we look back into back into like the 1920s and 30s, we were very level pegging with places like Sweden, who made a conscious decision to have a more equitable society. And it's a healthier, happier society as a result of that. So we've gone badly wrong in the decisions made in the past, and that's why we've got to address the inequality, because that's the unfairness people are talking about. It is why some people are struggling in the cost of living, and clearly some people are profiting as well. And that's why we need to look at how we equalise that, how we address some of the gross extractions which are happening, whether it's in housing or in our public services, where people are coming in, they're ripping us off, and to ensure that instead we've got an investment economy where we are seeding growth and, of course, making sure that things are under public accountability and public control, because that's how we get the public good element and brings the society together, because we're all working to one thing as opposed to a self-interest, which is really the orthodoxy of Margaret Thatcher. We need to pivot away from that. We've been saying it for a long time.
Okay,
and
but
I
Rachel,
think now is the chance to do that.
Rachel, our borrowing costs are already higher than in Greece. So, we are already on a knife edge with the markets. And, those costs of borrowing are ticking up all the time we talk about this leadership chaos. We can't afford the luxury of what you're discussing.
It isn't always about putting more money into the system, and I think it's a mistake to think that everything comes from that. But it is about equalising the amount of money that goes in and making sure that everybody pays their way and that those in need get the support they require. So let's look at a more equal society and use that as our driving force to ensure that we've got communities up and down the country who are benefiting from a government. I certainly know the challenges. We've got the lowest funded local authority, lowest funded health system, and yet some high areas of deprivation in my constituency. That is just not fair. We need to ensure the north to the south, the east to the west is fairly funded, supported, and of course has the injections responsibilities that it needs. But I think we need to see radical devolution to push power out and finances out from the centre, making decisions closer to people. And we need to see a change in the way that government works with Parliament. That relationship has become too dominant by government, meaning that government is not accountable to Parliament in the way that it should be. I believe a lot more scrutiny around pre-legislative processes would enable us to get policy right and have much better laws as well. So there's a lot to be done by a new leader coming in.
Rachel, Maskell, thank you very much for joining us. And while we've been speaking, we now have a new tally. 66 Labour MPs have now called for the Prime Minister to resign. The panel, Aisha and Nadeem, are on the sofa. Nadeem, I'm going to come to you about what we just heard about the call for higher taxes on the very wealthy, a fairer society.
I think, look, the markets are unforgiving. To say the bond markets don't matter, as Labour have said, or one particular candidate, Andy Burnham, said in the past. I don't know whether
he didn't quite say that, but yeah.
Whatever, right? Ultimately, and I think, joking aside, and sparing a thought for the King on Wednesday, for the nation watching and thinking that the government agenda, the government's programme for the next Parliament is now in doubt, up in the air, chaos in number 10, this is a problem made in number 10. The Prime Minister now is, lame duck is probably an understatement, needs to put country ahead of party, needs to resign and very quickly go to a general election, in my view, because the alternatives will just spook the market even further. Right? If we wait for Andy Burnham, is another, as Sam reminded us, at least 7 to 8 weeks. That's if he starts tomorrow.
Well, if he can get a seat.
Right, exactly. and then the chaos will continue. That's a very bad place. And if the Prime Minister to be taken at his word that he puts country ahead of party, then he needs to realise that the game is up. It's over for him.
Aisha, you've heard Ribeiro-Addy and Rachel Maskell there, MPs on the left of the party calling for higher taxes on the very wealthy, a completely different policy agenda, which would take the country veering off to the left, wouldn't it? What's your view?
Well, you're right. They're both from Campaign Socialist Group. Who you haven't had on the show tonight is more people from the other wings of the party, and they haven't sort of come out yet. So I wouldn't extrapolate just two members of the PLP as what everybody wants.
Well, except that Keir Starmer has acknowledged that this morning in his speech. You know, he's got to return Labour to the party of the working people. You know, it's code.
But he also
isn't it?
didn't. He also said we shouldn't be an impersonation of Reform or the Green Party. We have to do, and also Labour only wins from the centre ground. Labour has never won from being more on the left.
He wasn't sounding very centrist, though, this morning, was he?
Well, he wasn't really sounding very anything this morning. I think that's the problem. I think that's why we're in the problem. I think that's where we're sort of the problem that we're in today. But what I would say, in terms of this left-right thing, we have had for years now people from the right saying this government is so left-wing because you've really cracked down on non-doms, you know, you've put more taxes on business. So I think there's a slight inconsistency. You know, you've put taxes on, you know, you've removed the VAT exemption from private schools. On the one hand, you have people from the right of politics saying, oh, my goodness, you're all kind of Marxist. And on the other hand, oh, it's going to swing to the left. I think that the trick is, and I've said this many times before, it is not either a pendulum to the right or to the left. It is coming up with a bespoke policy prescription and perspective that suits and meets the demands of where the country is right now.
Sam, this show's on air for another hour and a half. We're ticking up now, 66 Labour MPs calling for the Prime Minister to resign. I'm wondering if we're going to get to 81 in the next hour and a half.
It feels like there's a coordinated release of names. So on the current trajectory, we'll get very, very close to that. That doesn't trigger anything specific, of course. It's about momentum. 30 of those, Cathy, have happened since the Prime Minister's sort of back me or sack me speech earlier. Seems like it's not entirely back me. 4 of them are government aides. Some of them are linked to Wes Streeting. I just think that the discussion really is looking forward to tomorrow morning and the Cabinet meeting and what are those members going to say? I know, because I've had discussions with them, that even some of the Cabinet ministers that are publicly backing Keir Starmer do not think he should take the Labour Party into the next election. The public view of some of the most supportive, privately, is far from that. So I think it is fair to say the Cabinet support is really, really waning.
Actually, and for the political anoraks watching tonight, let me just make this point. The political anoraks watching tonight, Melanie Ward, who is David Lammy's PPS, is the Member of Parliament for Cowdenbeath and Kirkcaldy,
which is
Gordon Brown's seat.
But I think, to go back to a point that Sam made earlier about, you know, everything is, you know, you could be in a sort of state of suspended animation. That there's a lot of truth in that. However, Downing Street has been dysfunctional for quite a long time. We have not had a proper chief of staff now in Downing Street for quite some time. We haven't got a proper director of communications at Downing Street. You know, I think that's another, and this is one of the things that Rachel Maskell alluded to. The political operation at Downing Street has been wanting really right from the beginning as well. And, you know, we've had lots of difficult issues like the welfare reform stuff that ended up sort of going nowhere and ended up being this massive U-turn. A lot of people privately have also been pointing to the fact that there is no firepower at Downing Street, and there hasn't been for quite some time.
But the issue, to my mind, Aisha, is that, of course, you're spot on. Nothing's worked for a while, and Downing Street's been half empty. It's one of the curiosities of where we are. But if we have a change of Prime Minister, you are going to get new Cabinet ministers in almost every brief, new ministers in almost every brief. They're going to sit down and go, OK, energy policy, take it from the top. Why have we got high energy prices? All the work that has been done over the last few years stops, is reset, and it starts again from scratch.
I suspect Ed Miliband will be staying put.
Maybe he'll be Prime Minister.
But a serious challenge. If Wes Streeting is Prime Minister, I'm not so sure that's true.
I think that is true.
But all of Britain's problems, in that King's speech on Wednesday, there is special educational needs legislation. There is legislation that will be hard to pass through the Commons.
Can I come back to you on that? And I think because you make a fair chance about coming back. The one thing that I would say is the Labour Party, I think, has got actually a lot of really good, talented people. What we have really lacked is a leadership team, including the Prime Minister and the people around him at Downing Street, that have been able to bring this group of people together as a team and to get them to form. So I think, you know,
why do you think that is?
Because I think it's been very factional.
But then we get to the position where you're changing everything to stay the same.
And quite inexperienced as well. Very
OK, well, we are now going to talk to a former Director of Policy for Keir Starmer, so perhaps she can shed some light on this very point. And that is Clare Ainsley, Keir Starmer's former Director of Policy. She now works at the Progressive Policy Institute. Claire, I suspect you were able to hear some of that. Can you shed any light on why this team in Number 10 appears to be so dysfunctional?
Well, as the team alluded to in your studio, there was obviously a major change with the Prime Minister's long-standing Chief of Staff, Morgan McSweeney, exiting the operation over the Mandelson issues. And the Prime Minister has not yet confirmed who that new team will be. So I do think that that is one of the things that has to be resolved as soon as possible, because the parliamentary parties certainly want to have a consistent line of contact. And of course, we and the rest of the public need to make sure that there is a really clear forward plan, whatever comes out of this.
Well, whatever does come out of it, because since we've been speaking, it's now 67 Labour MPs calling for Sir Keir Starmer to resign. So every minute that tally appears to be going up. It's impossible, is it not, or becoming impossible for the Prime Minister to stay?
Well, I don't think that's the case as yet, but today has clearly not been a good day. We've got important days coming up. We've obviously got a cabinet meeting tomorrow, which I think is absolutely critical now. And you've got the King's speech. So I thought that Keir this morning was very candid. I thought he made a really strong case. But as the panel are saying and discussing, some of the policies that were then pointed to didn't quite match up to perhaps some of that mood of change and what he referred to as this change to the status quo that clearly is what the public are hungry for.
I want to come back to policy in just a second, because obviously that was your area of expertise. But if you were in Number 10 now, what would you be advising the Prime Minister at this moment?
Well, the crucial thing is this relationship with the parliamentary party. This drip of names is clearly just doing so much damage to not just the Prime Minister, but I think the Labour Party overall. Look, I don't think that having a leadership challenge or a contest at this point, for all of the reasons that the panel have said, not least, as Sam said, you then have to press reset on a whole load of policy areas that they're already underway with changing. So I don't think it is in the country's interests, but what the team at Number 10 need to be focused on is ensuring that they get as much support as possible. And crucially, that cabinet meeting tomorrow really needs to be clear about how they are pulling together as a team, because I think most members of the Labour Party and most people in the country do not want to see an internal Labour Party dispute spill out into a contest.
Sam, you had a question for Claire.
Thank you. Hi, Claire. It's Sam Coates. If there is a change of Prime Minister, how much room for manoeuvre really is there? Do you think that an incoming Prime Minister is bound by the Labour manifesto? Do you think that the incoming Prime Minister is bound by the fiscal rules?
I think they are. I think that, call me old-fashioned, but we did have a general election less than 2 years ago on which the party was elected on its manifesto. And it was also took a stance. It took a stance on fiscal responsibility. It did not take the position that we should be sending borrowing even further. And that has resulted, of course, in some of the decisions that have been so unpopular with elements of the Parliamentary Labour Party. And I'm not surprised. It's difficult times. But I don't think that in our system you can just have a new Prime Minister who declares a mandate from, I'm not sure what, an internal selection. There will be overwhelmingly then a call for there to be a general election to secure that mandate. And I think that is not a path that the party should be going down. Now, clearly there needs to be a course correction. I don't think you can say it's steady as she goes. This is clearly not the terrain we're in. But I don't think that people have then carte blanche to instigate a manifesto of their choosing.
So, Claire, are you now of the view, as I've been asking our guests in the studio tonight, that whatever happens now, the Labour Party will, in policy terms, shift to the left, whether Keir Starmer stays, which looks increasingly unlikely, or whether someone new comes in?
that I think it's likely because of the politics of the Labour Party that if there is a change, it is a change leftwards, because that is the pull, that is the pressure. But that is the opposite of what the country needs right now. And what the country needs, and what Keir, I thought, started to outline, was a plan for economic growth. And what will get the economy growing are things that the Labour Party as a party won't necessarily want. It would be things like, you know, reversing the increase on national insurance on employers, holding the minimum wage for young people so we can get recruiting young people again. These are all parts of the picture that actually we need to be considering to get the economy growing, get businesses confident in investing, but they aren't things that the current Labour Party is calling for. So yes, I agree that the politics make that likely, but I don't think that's the prescription that the country needs right now.
What are the consequences then if the party does shift to the left, as you've just described?
Well, I don't think there is an electoral mandate for the party to shift to the left. As Aisha said, the Labour Party doesn't get elected when it shifts to the left. Keir Starmer is one of only 2 people who have taken the Labour Party from opposition into government in the last nearly 50 years. And I think that MPs have to be thinking very hard tonight about whether they want to throw that out and then impose what would be a mandate from a self-selected group onto the country, or whether they grit their teeth and get on with the course correction that is required to turn this around from where we are.
And Claire, you know Keir Starmer well. How has it come to this point? You know, he won this landslide, as you pointed out. What are the kind of personal and political deficiencies that have meant that we are where we are today?
Well, I think that what he did as opposition leader was take the Labour Party from its 4th election defeat, 26 points behind in the polls, and really steadily over time took it on a course back to the electorate. And the key thing for him about that was he said country first, and he wanted to take the Labour Party back to the people. And he was really hard on the party, and he said it's us that's got to change, not the public. Whereas what's happened, unfortunately, in government is that we've now had a situation where, rather than being the kind of master of that destiny, we feel sometimes like we are managers of what's coming in, and we've not been able to hold that line with the party. So I think this is about fundamentally the relationship between the Labour leader, the party and the country. And what we are in it for is for the country and for the people who need a Labour government to serve them, not for what the party's interest might be.
And, you know, I put this question to the Prime Minister when I interviewed him when we launched this show a couple of weeks ago. Well, is it the case, perhaps, that he was a very good lawyer, but he's just not that good as a politician? You know, people say that about him, don't they?
There are lots of things that you could point to and say, well, I wish he was a bit more like this and a bit more like that. And this morning when he spoke, I thought when he opened his speech, he spoke, I thought, quite personally, quite forcefully, and it was that kind of passion that I thought, right, we need to see more of this. So he can do it when the moment requires. But I would also say that it's not as if you get another leader and all of the problems that the country faces suddenly disappear. What we saw in the election last Thursday wasn't just that Labour lost votes to reform. It was that people started voting for multiple parties. And that is what we are seeing all over the world in lots of different developed democracies. So the idea, of course, there are things that you would want kids to do individually differently. But the idea that suddenly some other candidate, we know not what and who, will come along and sweep all of that away with their incredible prowess. Forgive me for being cynical about that. I think it's a really tough job. I think it's tough times for centre-left parties. But I think that facing inwards to the party is the wrong thing at this point.
Well, but, you know, people might say that Angela Rayner, she's got that authenticity. She speaks with guts and conviction. You saw her speaking passionately today. You know, perhaps she's the antidote to Nigel Farage, who's currently sweeping the board and has, you know, swept the board last week.
There's lots of people, I think, in the Labour Party who I think in the future might make brilliant candidates, and we would see that at the right time. But at the moment, it's guesswork. And I would prefer us to take the electoral mandate we've got and pursue that with the entire cabinet we've got. So this isn't for me just about Keir Starmer. It's about the fact that actually we've got a Home Secretary who is leading on taking difficult decisions on immigration, being much tougher actually than the Conservatives were prepared to be, and much more effective. We've got a Chancellor who's holding
she's hated by the party for that. We heard Ribeiro-Addy from the left-wing socialist group, basically saying she wasn't doing it in the Labour Party's name.
Well, there will, the Labour Party, as they say, is a broad church and not always a very harmonious church. And clearly there are people who are dissenting who've never agreed with the programme that's been set out. But you've got to say to people who are kind of wavering about this is, are you prepared to just roll the dice and you don't actually know what any of those options are? It is like rolling a dice and you don't know what's on any of those 6 sides. And I think for the Labour Party, it is absolutely critical now to think really, really deeply about going over the top at this moment, because I don't think that this is the moment for us to be doing that. And I think we will learn the lesson through failure and defeat once again if we do that at this point. There will be a leadership contest at some point in the future. There'll be lots of brilliant, talented people coming forward, and then that can be tested. But right now, we're less than 2 years in. I do not think the public are going to forgive us for doing what the Tories did, which was turf out their leaders pretty freely.
But do you admit there, you said there's going to be a leadership contest at some point, that whatever happens, Keir Starmer will not be leading the party into the general election? Is it right that there is a leadership contest in due course?
There will be a contest at some point, like that's just a fact. He's not going to go on as leader forever. And that's what I see the talent. Well, he said that what he had was a 10-year programme of renewal, and I think what he's indicating is actually the problems that we've got in the country are going to take a very long time to turn around. So I think anybody, to be honest, who starts predicting timescales is just guesswork, basically.
Right.
And at that point, then we should have talented people come through the party. We've also got a new generation of people coming through who are fantastic, who I'd like to see have more room to develop, grow, and think about their ideas for the future. And when that time comes, I'm sure Andrew and other people could be putting their names in. But at this point, we need to be getting behind the cabinet we've got and the plan we've got and make that work. But as I say, it does need a course correction, because clearly we have to heed the lessons from last Thursday's elections.
Clare Ainsley, thank you very much for joining us. Aisha, stick behind the cabinet we've got. That's
yeah. I mean, it was really interesting. And look, I've got a lot of sympathy for what Clare said, and I think she made a lot of good points. But I go back to the Democrats in America, and actually the organisation that Clare works for does a lot of work with the Democrats as well. And when you speak to Democrats now, they just say all the signs were there, and we were not brave enough to, have proper succession planning. We left it too late to suddenly swap out Joe Biden for Kamala Harris. And you could argue not just America, but the whole world is paying a heavy price for what happened there. We all look at, Donald Trump in America, and literally most sensible people are absolutely horrified by what's happened. We are all going to pay a very heavy price for Donald Trump's reckless war with Iran. So there are big consequences, and I do appreciate what Clare was saying.
You see the same thing happening here with Nigel Farage.
Absolutely, and I think Clare's point about, look, there'll be a leadership challenge at some point down the future. What is that after Labour loses the next general election? And that generation of talent she spoke with, the problem is, I think she's right, there are some fantastic members of the PLP who came in 2024. People from brilliant backgrounds, military, diplomatic, business, brilliant backgrounds. They don't get a look in. And it goes back to what Rachel Maskell was saying earlier. There has been, sadly, a culture in Downing Street of not including really good voices and ideas and thoughts from people from across the PLP. What should have been a blessing has turned into a curse because of bad political management, I'm afraid.
Do you think Clare Ainsley's right that you've got to stick to the manifesto and the fiscal rules?
I think that actually there is quite a lot of good stuff in the manifesto. And I think if the Cabinet and the party and the PLP were sensible, they would get somebody in who would not veer madly off to the left or the right. And the fiscal rules are incredibly important. But I will add this to it. The bond markets don't live in isolation in Ivory Tower. The bond markets will be looking at everything, and they know that the world changes. The big thing we have not mentioned policy-wise is defence spending. Whether you sit on the left or the right of the party, defence spending is going to have to go up. This is not a challenge 20 years down the track. The defence challenge is here now. Now, in order to get that defence spending...
But isn't the real problem for Keir, and both Sam and Claire, it's almost like a throwaway line that, fiscal rules, the 10-year borrowing for this country is at a 20-year high. We're at 5.1%. We got rid of Liz Truss when we got to 4.7%, right? It's insane where we are. There's no growth. This government's not talking about growth, right? Well, people's cost of living, the energy... Hold on, we're an outlier. We're an outlier. Look at the G7. You can't tell me on this show we're all going to sit quietly and accept that the fiscal rules that Rachel Reeves has set are right. The reason he's in trouble is because, actually, his agenda's not working. It's failing people at home. This obsession of Ed Miliband's on net zero is hurting people.
You've got nothing else to say. How many times have you gone on and on about Ed Miliband? The point
is... Because people feel the pain. No, because you can't bully people into staying quiet about this stuff. People feel the pain in their energy bills. People feel the pain in their cost of living. People feel the pain when they can't get their kids into the right school because of immigration.
Immigrants. Let's blame immigrants for everything. Potholes. Let's blame immigrants for everything. We need to be having a much
You are just
bigger
haranguing now for no reason.
You're the one that's been shouting
I'm
over
not.
me. Yeah,
you just can't. It can't be. I listened to you very carefully, and you talked about the fiscal rules as if they're delivering something decent for the country. They're not. The problem for Keir Starmer is he is not delivering on his agenda, and the left flank of your party is attacking him hard. And that's where he's stuck.
I would honestly take... the thing is, Nadeem, you don't have to be...
I've listened patiently.
You don't have to be just a sort of, talking point for reform. We're trying to have a more nuanced discussion.
I am.
And you should know that better than anybody, having been part of the last government, which absolutely was like a wrecking ball in this country.
We got rid of Liz Truss when the borrowing was at 4.7%. It's at 5.1% today.
And you listen to a lot of economics experts.
Yes.
This country, inflation was heading down. We were heading to probably 2 cuts in interest rates. This war in Iran is going to be absolutely disastrous.
This country is an outlier.
It's
an outlier.
The UK is an outlier, isn't it? That is the case.
The economy has not been good in this country for a long time. I'm the first to admit that. And mistakes were made.
Decisions made by Labour exacerbated the problem.
I have not shied away from that.
And it looks like it's going to be... Higher taxes are not going to help, are they?
To sort of say that everything has been perfect. Far from it. I'm not here to be like comical alley for my party, like this guy is. But his latest party...
Keep the insults coming. Keep the insults coming because...
It's about to get a whole lot worse, though,
it is going to get a whole lot worse. What we're talking about because of Donald Trump.
Also because you're about to change your leader and shift to the left.
My goodness.
We don't know if we're going to go straight to the left. We don't even know if there's going to be a new leader. But what I would say is mistakes have been made by this government, undoubtedly, and you'd be mad to admit that. And no one, you want an honest conversation,
you mean
right?
Mad tonight?
Tonight, you've got the winter fuel allowance was a big problem. Personally, I think kind of putting national insurance up on jobs was a mistake. Personally, I think that has not helped growth. But I think we also have to be honest about the external factors that have also affected the economy.
That's a fair point, isn't it?
I don't disagree, but you both have just, I hope I should admit, we're an outlier because of the fragility of the British economy under Rachel Reeves. The problem for Keir Starmer is his agenda has failed, which is why he got punished at the local elections, and now the hard left of his party is attacking him as well because they don't think he's been socialist enough, right? And as Nigel said, it's not about left or right, but it's about what is sensible, what's common sense. If energy bills are too high, let's look at our energy strategy. It's not a good strategy.
OK.
Right?
Sam, just bring us the latest, because 67 Labour MPs now, it has been ticking up. Have we reached a sort of pause, a hiatus? Tell us.
So we've just reached 68. We've got 32 now. Labour MPs have weighed in since the speech, 4 members of the government. Labour MPs actually messaging me while I'm on air. The latest one is actually Matt Bishop. He says that, with a heavy heart, he's withdrawing his support on the Prime Minister's leadership. He's a sort of worked in policing, I think, on the sort of soft left of the party. On the screen behind us, you can see some of the characters. On the first screen, quite a lot of them from the left. Rachel Maskell, who we spoke to earlier, Nadia Whittome, Richard Bergen, Andy MacDonald to the left. is currently visible. But let's look at the next screen with the sort of fresher names on it. And there you have 2024 Intech MPs like Chris Curtis. You've got Catherine McKinnell, who stepped down from government last year. Clive Betts, who's the most senior Labour MP in the House. He came into Parliament in 1992. Gosh, and then here's the very latest while we've been on air. That includes Charlotte Nichols. She, well-regarded MP. She was actually spearheading the rebellion on jury trials for the government. God knows what's happening to policies like that. You couldn't get that through, that sort of thing through with discipline where it is at the moment. Mary Kelly-Foy, one of the last to go as well. Debbie Abrahams, who we were speaking to earlier. So the sheer breadth, select committee chairs, the old, the young, the left, the right, the whole spectrum is coming out. And yes, that number is ticking up, 68 on the Sky counter right now.
Well, thank you, Sam. Let's bring in Andrew Lewin, Labour MP for Welwyn Hatfield. Andrew, it's over, isn't it, for the Prime Minister?
Good evening, Cathy. Welcome to your new show on Sky. Look, regretfully walking into a trap. I know you've got Nadeem Zahawi with you on the sofa. In the last few weeks in the local election campaign, it's been Nigel Farage who's been saying vote reform to get Starmer out. And if we go through with this, we are giving our principal opponent and our most dangerous opponent exactly what he wants. And I think that's a big, big mistake.
Well, let me tell you just spell out the consequences, because we've been hearing from Nadeem Zahawi, former Chancellor, about the impact on the markets, the fact that, growth is non-existent in this country. It's about to get a whole lot worse, isn't it, if the leader's changed?
Well, look, exactly right. Whenever there have been these wobbles, and sadly there have been a number of wobbles over the last few months, what the markets have said is that they want stability. They want to see Rachel Reeves in number 11 and the Prime Minister in number 10. But I think it's really important that colleagues walk through what the impact of a change of leader would mean. It would mean a contest. There would be no such thing, I'm afraid, as an orderly transition. That's very clear reading the sort of quite different messages that some colleagues have put out tonight. Some are calling for a very quick timetable for a change. Some are calling for this orderly transitions, perhaps with a view to a candidate isn't currently in Parliament. All of that will add to the chaos and the uncertainty. And I don't believe my constituents who I represent in Welwyn Hatfield want to see that, and nor do millions of supporters, Labour supporters across the country.
Andrew, we've now got 69 Labour MPs calling for the Prime Minister to quit. 4 of those are government, ministerial aides, the most junior rung of the government ladder. 33 of them have come out since the speech this morning that was supposed to rescue the Prime Minister. I mean, that is dire. It's unsustainable, isn't it?
Look, I'm not doubting the gravity of the moment. But, we still have a very big choice to make. We can look over the cliff edge and choose to jump or choose to come back. And I really hope we don't jump because the stakes are so high. And I understand the sense of frustration and concern from colleagues after such difficult results last week. But I can't see any scenario where walking into a leadership contest that will last weeks is good for the country or good for the Labour Party. People want us to get on and deliver the agenda that we were elected on.
But, I mean, the Prime Minister has walked into this, hasn't he? He had this record landslide. He's squandered it. There's been, I think it's 16 U-turns now. Correct me if I'm wrong. He had one job this morning, which was to set out his vision to relaunch once again after multiple relaunches. He flunked it.
Well, I didn't agree with that characterisation. Let me give you one example. I have been, ever since I was elected in 2024, a passionate advocate for a stronger UK-EU relationship. More than a year ago, I was calling for a youth mobility deal. The Prime Minister was really clear today that he sees this as a big focus for his premiership. I think he's absolutely right, and he's right to do that in a world that's been completely changed since 2024.
And he sat on the fence again today, didn't he? He didn't signal clearly that his red lines on the single market or customs union membership were being torn up or even up for debate in the run-up to the next general election. He sat on the fence. It was a pyramid of waffle, wasn't it?
No, well, I listened carefully to all the questions from the journalists, and actually the Prime Minister was was asked, in your manifesto next time around, would you rule out single market or customs union membership? And he said no, but what he's right to do is focus on delivering at the summit, which is just a matter of weeks away, a really important summit, so that we get the youth mobility deal over the line, the SPS deal, which is so important for the agriculture sector, and build from there. And one of the really important things in the UK-EU relationship is we look at the EU perspective on this as well. They want to be dealing with a UK government that is stable and a Prime Minister that they know and who's been rebuilding trust after so much damage was done under the Conservatives.
But, you know, surely the moment, the gravity of the moment, as you've put it, you've used that word gravity, called for a really brave approach. The Prime Minister could have signalled very clearly, not just that, you know, in response to a journalist's question that he wasn't ruling it out, but that he was ruling in a debate on rejoining the customs union and the single market. I mean, let alone the Green policy at the moment, which is rejoin the EU.
Well, the language he used was deliver at the summit as a platform to build on in the future. And I've spent a little bit of time with European parliamentarians in Brussels, and they think that is absolutely the right approach. They want to build bridges with us, but they want to do it with a trusted leader in the UK who they know, and they want to do this over time. And there'll be nobody in the PLP, if they're watching this, who has any doubt that I am a proud pro-European, but doing this in a staged way is the right approach, I think.
You came in 2024. Are you disappointed, appalled even by what's unfolded since then?
Look, there are lots of things that we've got right. NHS waiting lists are falling, the minimum wage is up, record year for renewable energy. But of course, we've made mistakes as well. That happens in politics. But I think this is the single biggest test that we have had as an intake in 2024. And I am, you know, choosing to come on your show tonight because I want to repeat my plea to colleagues to think again about this, to back the Prime Minister and get on with delivering on the agenda we were elected.
OK, so spell out to colleagues who are at this very moment considering whether to put pen to paper or, you know, tweet something on X. What are the consequences if they remove the Prime Minister now?
Look, I think the consequences would be a really chaotic period for our party and, more importantly, for the country. There is no doubt that this would be a lengthy leadership contest if it was to come to pass. As I said at the outset, we've got people giving statements which indicate very different things. Some of them are hoping that Andy Burnham can return swiftly to the Commons. Others are saying, well, we must deal with this immediately and have a new leader in place. That lack of consistency, even among the people who have called for the Prime Minister to go, and of course that's a minority of the Parliamentary Labour Party, shows how chaotic this would be if we went for it. And just one other thought. Cathy, you know, the situation in Iran and the Middle East is grave. In a matter of weeks, we will be seeing what the new energy price cap is. One of the things this government should be laser focused on is how are we going to support people with their energy bills and accelerate the transition to renewable energy. If we're distracted by a leadership contest, we won't be in a position to do that.
Well, Andrew, we've just had a message in from Catherine West, who obviously went public at the weekend as a sort of stalking horse candidate. She says there are 80 all told, including many public and a smaller number of private in my inbox. She says tomorrow I will give back the names so people can go public themselves. She says she's spoken to the whips. They're aware of the numbers, just not the names. I mean, this is happening now, isn't it? It's game on for a leadership contest.
Well, of course, look, I'm just learning that news now. But what the Prime Minister has said consistently, if there is a challenge, he will fight it on the basis of the mandate that he has from the British people, and he'll continue to have my support. And
we've just discovered that the numbers that we've collated of MPs who've gone public with calls for the Prime Minister to quit has just ticked up to 70. So it's very close now, the number of MPs publicly who have called for the Prime Minister to quit. Just a final thought, Andrew. You know, you're obviously a supporter of the Prime Minister. What do you think will be going through his head right now in Downing Street?
Look, he will be focused on getting through this period. It's clearly a very important 24 and 48 hours, and I'm sure he's also thinking about the King's speech. One of the things that's so important is that we get to Wednesday with clarity on this situation, hopefully, from my perspective, with the Prime Minister firmly in charge, so he can set out, you know, his vision for the country. And I'm sure that that's what he's thinking about now, as well as probably the Spurs game.
Andrew, thank you, indeed. Well, we just caught a glimpse of the cat in number 10, so all business as usual. Sam's got a question for you. If you wouldn't mind just hanging on, Andrew. Sam.
Andrew, you want the Prime Minister to continue in post, but I don't think even you would deny that he's been weakened by 70-odd Labour MPs calling for him to go. In a week or two, thousands of documents are going to be released in the latest tranche of the Mandelson files. Do you really think that the Prime Minister could withstand a further blow? And it will be a blow, because there'll be embarrassing material in that. Do you really think he could withstand that? Isn't it better to deal with this now?
I mean, obviously, I have no idea what will be in those documents. I've spoken in the House of Commons twice on the Mandelson affair, and it was the right decision that the humble address passed, and so that all the documents were provided to the ISC, so that everything can be put out in the open. That is absolutely the right thing to do on such a grave subject matter. It's right the Prime Minister committed to it, and right that the government continues to have an approach which is transparent on it. But I don't think, without seeing those papers, there's anything more I could say on that one.
Andrew, thank you very much for bearing with us. Sam, I just want to come back to you because, you know, we were looking at the door of number 10 then. You do sort of wonder what goes through a Prime Minister's mind at this point. He said to us, actually, in what could be one of his last full-length broadcast interviews that he does, if he does end up getting toppled, just a couple of weeks ago, he said the person he'd be listening to as he makes his decision on whether to stay or go would be his wife, Vic. What do you think's going through his mind?
I think he is weighing up the pressure that he is under. He is weighing up whether or not there is an opportunity to go with dignity if such an opportunity exists. Keir Starmer is a proud man. In many ways, he's an enigma. In a curiosity, he doesn't have many political friends, that's well known. He doesn't even really seem to enjoy politics. We do seem to be getting to a tipping point, and a lot of people agree with this, where it looks nearly impossible for him to stay in office. So I think the question is now one, maybe the start of a discussion about legacy, about going with dignity, going not looking like you're just simply dragged out by the force of your opponent, but, you know, there'll be some need for him to show some, you know, the moment he shows that he understands the position that he's in, I'm sure, and suggests that a timetable for his departure, I'm sure the Labour Party will throw its arms around him and sort of embrace him with love and gratitude the moment that he takes the difficult step of deciding to go and make it as least unpleasant as possible. At the moment, he is sucking up so much pain that surely a bit of his mind will be thinking about that.
Just briefly, Aisha, talking about legacy, there have been appeals to the Prime Minister to think of his legacy as a big whack of spending on defence. Is that something that he could look to do, to sort of elegantly leave?
I think he has certainly made a name for himself on the world stage, particularly in these very difficult times. So I think that's something he absolutely would want to think about. But I think Sam is right. I think it's very febrile at the moment because people are really worried about the next general election. But people have a huge amount of gratitude for what Keir Starmer did. The Labour Party is really bad at winning elections, and he did that. But I do think that, and he would have felt, we all felt this under Jeremy Corbyn as well. And of course, he vanquished Jeremy Corbyn and Corbynism from the party. No one person is bigger than the Labour Party. No one person can be bigger than the Labour Party is a collective, it's a movement, it's something which tries to be in power, it doesn't often get into power, and I think that's something that, you know, he and others will be thinking about.
And we'll continue this conversation in just a second. It is 9 o'clock. This is a special edition of the Cathy Newman Show on Sky News. The breaking news tonight: 4 ministerial aides have quit, urging the Prime Minister to resign. As the minutes have been ticking away tonight, we've been seeing a drip of MPs within his own party calling for Sir Keir Starmer to go. Earlier, he gave a speech designed to try and quell a rebellion, but as we sit here now, it does appear that speech has failed, with 69 Labour MPs now calling for Sir Keir Starmer to resign. We've been trying to get ourselves inside the Prime Minister's head in number 10. 2 weeks ago, he told me that he'd be listening to his wife, Vic, about when and whether to go. And we just wonder what conversations are going on behind that door tonight. We are keeping a close eye on the comings and goings in Downing Street. We just caught a glimpse of the cat, for example. Our chief political correspondent, John Craig, is there. John, what's the latest?
Well, the latest is that Larry's just been let back in. He came out to...
Has he had his tea?
He came out and had a stroll around to see what we're all up to here.
The big beast of the political jungle, John.
He wants to be back in number 10, just like the Prime Minister. The latest is that we understand that Catherine West believes she has 80 names already, and there are some who have privately said they're backing her call for a transition or a timetable or whatever. She has, we understand, been in touch with government whips, and of course the next drama probably is members of the cabinet acting and perhaps leaning on the Prime Minister to go. The Times is reporting that Sir Keir Starmer has been told by Shabana Mahmood, the Home Secretary, and other senior cabinet ministers to consider setting out a timetable for his departure. That Shabana Mahmood is one of at least 3 cabinet ministers to suggest he needs to consider his position, and that he'll be told at the cabinet tomorrow his position is increasingly unsustainable. There are suggestions now that the number saying that they want the PM to go is 70 or 80. Now, talking to politicians today, backbenchers, ministers and so on, I've been trying to work out what Catherine West's motives are, and there is a view that she is trying to help Wes Streeting by forcing the Prime Minister out early so that a contest takes place before Mr Burnham, Andy Burnham, is back in Parliament. And it does seem tonight, as the dusk settles here, that of course, all eyes now are on Wes Streeting and see how what he does in the next 12 to 24 hours or so. Andy Burnham must be deeply frustrated that things are moving at this pace because, of course, depending on the timetable that is set out, if it's a long timetable, of course, then he's got time to get into Parliament. But if it's quick, then, of course, his only option really is to fight Arbroath and Broughty Ferry up in Scotland. Labour only 850 votes behind the SNP there. It's a marginal. I can't imagine Andy Murray taking the high road up to... Andy Burnham, rather, taking the high road up to Scotland. But in all seriousness, it's grim inside there. The mood must be absolutely dreadful. The Prime Minister must have his head in his hands, as we saw him do in Prime Minister's Questions a week or so ago. And he's surrounded by his closest aides. We haven't seen many politicians here this evening. The only politicians we've seen go into number 10 this evening were John Healey, possibly to discuss a defence summit he's holding tomorrow on Ukraine and other defence issues, and Steve Reed, a loyalist who's been talking to broadcasters this evening. But we did hear actually that they've sent out for takeaway food, pizzas or whatever. They haven't been delivered at the front door, probably gone round the back. But right now, all the Prime Minister's closest aides and no doubt the Chief Whip's involved as well, although he's not here, because, of course, Parliament's not sitting again until Wednesday. They must be really doing the numbers tonight and just seeing how bad it is for the Prime Minister. The number of backbenchers, yes, a lot of the usual suspects. What struck me, so many of the younger MPs, and Cathy, I know you've been talking to them, younger MPs only elected in 2024, won their seats from the Conservatives, who are clearly very, very worried that they're only going to be in Parliament for one term. And some of the older hands have been urging them to calm down and not panic. The younger MPs worried about their futures. And here in number 10, all the signs are that the Prime Minister is being told, look, the game is up. You're going to have to make some sort of announcement, possibly tomorrow or possibly on Wednesday. Don't forget, he's got to face the House of Commons on Wednesday. The debate on the King's speech, of course, will get underway. King's Speech Wednesday morning, and then, of course, the big 4, 5, 6-day debate in Parliament led by the Prime Minister. So it really is crunch time for the Prime Minister in there, and it's serious. Beginning of the end game really is looking like the beginning of the end for the Prime Minister.
John, thanks very much for that. You can only imagine what's going on behind that door. Time running out for the Prime Minister. It appears inevitable that, now as the numbers keep on ticking up minute by minute, really, we're now on 70 MPs who have gone public and called for the Prime Minister to resign. I think it's been shifting around a little bit, some of the numbers. I mean, some of it, there's a bit of double counting maybe going on, but we have established now 70 Labour MPs. Sarah Hall, the latest to call for the Prime Minister to quit. So it has now ticked up to 70. And as John was saying, the Times reporting that Shabana Mahmood, member of the Cabinet, clearly Home Secretary, is reportedly going into the Prime Minister and telling him that he has to set out a timetable, or should consider setting out a timetable for his resignation. Well, we have political commentator Adam Bolton here with us. Adam, you've covered quite a few of these defenestrations in your time. Does it feel like the end game, as John was saying?
I think that the loss of the parliamentary party, I mean, we're now up, aren't we, to more than 1 in 4 backbenchers, probably 1 in 6 of the total parliamentary party now saying the Prime Minister should go. And when things get up to that level, it looks very dangerous. Of course, have to remember that in this case, there's no instrumentality to force him out. If it gets to 80, a lot of people are talking about that because that would be the number a stalking horse needs. But it's quite clear that there's no challenger who would get that. So the Prime Minister said he's going to stay on. He said he's going to fight the next election and win it. But it seems to me, after his speech today, which was very much an appeal to the party rather than, frankly, than an appeal to the country, that it just hasn't hit home.
Well, I want to bring you in, Aisha, because we're just hearing from union sources that Shabana Mahmood is amongst those saying that Sir Keir Starmer should go. The Home Office hasn't offered any comment, but that does appear a very significant development, doesn't it?
Yeah, this is a big moment when you have a big figure in the Cabinet coming out and breaking ranks. You know, the people we've been hearing from have been largely backbenchers. You know, of course, at the beginning it was the Socialist Campaign Group there, the sort of usual suspects. Then it was moving to the more loyalist people like Chris Curtis. For Shabana Mahmood's name to be in the frame now, that is a big, big moment.
And she's a courageous woman.
She is. I mean, we were discussing earlier, I mean, Belle Ribeiro-Addy was not terribly complimentary about her, but she is very brave. And I think she is somebody who is doing some of that hard thinking for the Labour Party and having to confront sort of, you know, difficult truths about where the country is and trying to kind of, you know, find a Labour solution to the problems around immigration. Immigration is coming down under Shabana Mahmood as well. But notwithstanding the conversation about immigration, this is a big moment and it points to the bigger undercurrents that it looks like the big crunch point will be the Cabinet meeting tomorrow. And the question will be, will other Cabinet members look Keir Starmer in the eye and say, enough is enough?
And, you know, Nadine, you have been in that situation as a Cabinet Minister. You're going into a Prime Minister. You know the herd has moved, or as Boris Johnson said, and you told that to his face. What was that like, delivering that message to him?
Difficult. And to his credit, he actually used the line in his resignation or in his stepping down.
So you gave him that line?
I went in and I said, look, he said, you know, keep working on the economic plan. I said, Prime Minister, the herd is stampeding and it just feels like it's impossible. And it was a difficult moment. He said, just go back to the Treasury and, you know, let's keep working. And I went back. And then I had another go by writing to him overnight or early in the early hours of the morning to say, look, it's over. And that's when he obviously had already made his mind up. Well, but, I mean, if you follow the logic of what Keir said today, which is, look, you know, I know, you know, I haven't delivered completely, but my policies are the right policies for the country, that it would be chaotic if you replace me, then if he puts country ahead of party, the honourable, the right thing to do is to call an election now, because if he thinks his policies are the right policies, put it to the country.
OK, and you've made that point several times. Yeah, exactly.
No, but follow the logic.
Exactly.
Adam, if he thinks that his policies are the right policies, but his party can't see it,
it is what Labour
would be
called
chaotic
for the Tories
for the country. A fast general election, right? If the country believes him, then he'll win.
Adam,
if it doesn't, then actually we will get back onto the road of stability.
Right, Adam, this is moving a lot faster than people had anticipated. You know, even just a few hours ago, we were all sort of thinking, well, he's, just about made it with the speech. That works in Wes Streeting's favour, doesn't it? Because, a lot of Andy Burnham's supporters have been making the running on this leadership, sort of notional leadership contest. Now, if it is moving that rapidly, the Cabinet goes in tomorrow, tells him to go, that's Wes Streeting's to lose, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it puts Wes Streeting in a much stronger position, which is possibly one of the reasons why he hasn't openly thrown his hat in the ring, because he doesn't want to be seen as the guilty party. But, I mean, I think the fact that Shabana Mahmood appears to be moving, a woman of principle, certainly, but someone who, remember, been lots of reports that the soft left were saying, well, if we get power, first thing we're going to do is sack Shabana Mahmood. So she would be, I would have thought, if she's not going to run herself and she doesn't really look like a papabile candidate, Wes Streeting would certainly be the most amenable next leader for her. So, I don't think it's a conspiracy, but I think people are working out the arithmetic of how this goes. I mean, remember that, according to our friends in The Times, Ed Miliband actually went to Keir Starmer before the bad results were confirmed and said, look, you should think about naming a timetable. But that was a timetable which seemed designed to accommodate Burnham. So I think that, that is one of the calculations that's going on now in the Labour Party. There are those who want it now because they don't want Burnham, and there are those who want delay because they do want Burnham.
Right. Well, just to reiterate for anyone who's just joined, union sources are telling Sky News that Shabana Mahmood is amongst those saying that Keir Starmer should go. The Home Office hasn't commented on that. It is something that The Times is reporting in tomorrow's newspaper, and that's online now, obviously. So this is a significant development. How does this, Aisha, how does this pan out from now, do you think?
Well, I think there is going to be a lot of kind of confusion and panic over the next sort of 24 hours. I mean, I spoke to a backbencher today who just said, look, we don't really know what to do because it's not in our DNA in the Labour Party to do this. We're really bad at regicide. She used a word that I can't repeat on air in terms of it's a bleep show. We know we're going to lose the next election, but at the same time, we can't carry on like this. At the same time, we don't really know what to do. We don't really know how to do it. We don't really know who to turn to. So I think there is quite a lot of panic. There's definitely a feeling that when people have encountered the doorstep and the public, they're getting a very visceral reaction, which is telling us the Labour Party is deeply, deeply unpopular right now. But at the same time...
Well, worse than that for Keir Starmer. Keir Starmer is deeply unpopular.
Yeah, correct.
Kryptonite.
That's supporting.
Adam, you've covered... How many leadership contests have you covered? Have you totted up?
Depends how many parties you're talking about.
Well, multiple different parties, multiple different leadership contests.
I thought we're probably up into, well into double figures.
Right, well, so where do you think this goes from here? And at this time of economic crisis and, war going on in several locations around the world, how perilous is this for the country?
Well, it's terribly bad timing, not least because of the King's speech coming up in 2 days' time. My own feeling about this is it's not good for the country, and we've heard from people like Jim and Neil saying, the markets will go crazy, the bond markets will go crazy. There could be something, going very seriously wrong, which is why I think, it needs to be handled very carefully. But
is it possible
when parties get into this type of position, they don't tend to worry.
Right, there's a momentum that's inescapable.
Yeah, I mean, the Tory party pushed out Margaret Thatcher, when she was going to the first big European meeting after the fall of the Berlin Wall. Parties will do this if they think it is in their interests to get rid of people, get rid of a leader. And I think that message has come through, pretty loud and clear. And because although there is the argument about how will the wider public see it, and I have to say all the, my friends abroad are just saying, your country's a basket case, good luck and all the rest of it. But they're already saying that. So in that sense, the question then becomes is how much worse would it be? And from a Labour point of view, if you could get someone who could lead, because I think that is what this is all about in the end. Keir Starmer, whatever good qualities he has, is not a leader. He's not someone who operates politically. He's also not a people person. I mean, that's the thing. A lot of some of the people who've been speaking up, take Catherine West, for example, she was sacked from the government for no particularly good reason other than to make room for someone else. Never got a phone call from the Prime Minister.
I know other people in that situation.
Never, and then there are loads and loads of people. So there just isn't that affection for someone who, as you say, they're being told by voters is kryptonite.
And there was that terribly telling anecdote, wasn't there, about the Prime Minister who sort of hunkered down, reading for hours on end, reading, and his aides sort of don't know quite what to make of this. And in a way, you sympathise, because there's a lot to get across as a Prime Minister, isn't there, of course? But it also plays into what you're saying, that he's not got that kind of people-person quality that, Tony Blair had or someone like that.
Yeah, and people, apparently, according to the focus groups, they don't trust him. They think he's insincere. They are confused by all the business about him saying, I'm the son of a toolmaker, because to them, Sir Keir Starmer, KC, sounds pretty posh. And so there is not that element of trust in the Prime Minister, in the leader, and that is one of the things that's done.
And just to pick up on that, I think whatever political party you're in, but particularly in Labour politics, you've got to love people. You've got to love the game of politics a bit. You've got to love being in amongst it. You've got to love speaking to people from all different tribes of the party. You've got to be really good at working the tea room, sitting down with the brothers and sisters with the trade union movement. You do have to have that skill, and that is very important.
OK, who can best do that, then?
Well, I think Angela could do it. I think Wes could do it. I think Andy Burnham could do it. I mean, there could be people that, we're not talking about as well. I think all of them have got the qualities. Well, there could be other people in the PLP. Remember, David Cameron came from nowhere. Everybody thought it was...
Well, and so did Tony Blair and Gordon Brown back in the day. I mean, Adam, is there someone out there who is no one we've mentioned so far?
Well, I do think you need to have a bit of experience in politics generally, and even David Cameron, had worked as a special advisor, whereas Keir Starmer's experience of government was as a civil servant rather than as a politician. I mean, I have to say, I know people talk about Al Khan's, and they used to talk about Dan Jarvis back in the day.
Al Khan,
everyone loves a soldier, But actually, again, does he have the depth of political experience?
And one of the things
it's not just about communication.
Just one of the things that people are just saying is the Keir Starmer thing. Would it be right to get somebody in who wasn't very politically experienced and understood how to manage what is quite a feral beast of the Labour Party?
But we've been going on about communication, and he's not the greatest communicator on earth, as we saw today. The reality is, Keir Starmer, the reality is none of his policies are working, right? Cost of living is tough. Borrowing is an outlier for this country. All these things, the net zero stuff that he tolerated from Ed Miliband, the way he handled Mandelson, right? All these things are decision-making. Right? And when you're in number 10, it is about that instinct, the ability to make decisions and to communicate it to the country. Right? When we were in the middle of the sort of darkest moments of the pandemic, you needed to be really good at making those. And we made terrible errors during that pandemic, and we paid the price for it as a Conservative government. So it's not just about loving the party, loving communicating, loving the trade unions. It's feeling the country's pain and dealing with it.
Yeah, I do think that's right. Certainly, I was at a load of political scientists today looking at the election results, and what was interesting was the issues which they were suggesting were driving people, and obviously the cost of living is one. But sort of talking about working people and which is divisive. The other, frankly, is the war. I mean, Keir Starmer keeps on giving himself a pat on the back for keeping us out of the war, but most people just, shrug about that. They
Yeah,
don't...
but it may be a different matter if we'd got involved in the war and they'd seen a sort of blowback from that, as we did after Iraq.
Yeah, but we didn't get involved in the war, and frankly...
That's job. You mean it's job done?
It's not clear to me that...
flip-flopped
but it's not clear to me that either Reform UK or the Conservatives would have joined in the bombing. All they would have done would have let the Americans use the bases from the beginning. And I suspect a lot of people wouldn't have had a problem with
And
that.
regardless of what happens, the citizens in this country are going to pay a heavy price, even though we might not have got involved right at the beginning. There's going to be an economic price.
And Adam, what do you think of the consequences if there's a, Angela Rayner elected or, Andy Burnham, who've spoken about a much more sort of left-wing policy agenda, higher taxes potentially, not getting the welfare bill under control? We don't know what a new leader might do. But what are the consequences of that shift?
Well, there is a question of what a new leader can do. I mean, they might want to break the fiscal rules, they might want to increase borrowing, but, we saw what happened to Liz Truss, and so someone with a bit more political nous, might not do that. I mean, my own feeling is if they can do it without too much blood on the floor, it can only be good for the Labour Party at this stage, simply because of fairly or not.
Whoever's in charge.
Yeah, the level of unpopularity which Keir Starmer has around him. I mean...
Right.
And it looks as if whoever comes in, maybe not Wes Streeting, but he'll have to make some concessions, will move further to the left. Right. That is where the Labour Party wants to go. I'm far from convinced that's where the country and voters want to go, but that's the reality, partly because of the whole Mandelson debacle. There's been this total rejection of New Labour. I mean, New Labour... is now a dirty word within the Labour Party. Yeah. And frankly, they brought back the second-raters and the Brownites and that business of Gordon Brown and Harriet Harman, with all due respect.
Your former boss. Adam, thank you very much, as ever, for your analysis. Let's go now to the Labour MP, Graham Stringer. Graham, is game over for the Prime Minister, is it?
Yes, I think it's been over for some time. It's been when, not if. Certainly since last Thursday, but before that, he'd been in the last saloon taking us up for some time. In private, he'd lost the support of most of the Labour MPs I talked to. I wouldn't know in absolute numbers. So what has been clear in private for some time is now clear in public.
Well, Graham, I mean, what we've been hearing tonight is that there is this potential move from Shabana Mahmood to tell the Prime Minister that it's time to set out a timetable. That's what we're reporting tonight. Events are moving very rapidly, and that does favour Wes Streeting if he decides to throw his hat in the ring and launch a leadership challenge. Do you agree with that assessment?
I do. I mean, there's two reasons, it seems, to having an orderly process, and one is that the people who wish that Andy Burnham were back in the Parliamentary Labour Party want a long time so that he can get selected and elected. I think that is a bit pie in the sky when you look at the results in the north of England. It's difficult to know where a safe seat would be. It would also leave the back door open for the position of Mayor of Greater Manchester. But there is also the fact that we've had a lot of people's names being put forward, but we've not had much of a policy debate. And I think all the big issues before us, from illegal immigration to the economy, relatively slow improvements in the health service, one can go on through the major issues. We don't know really where any of the potential candidates stand on those very difficult decisions. So we've got to have that debate.
Graham, just finally, would you be willing to sacrifice your seat for Andy Burnham to facilitate that transition?
No, for two reasons. One, I gave a commitment when I was elected to serve the people of Blakely and Middleton South. And two, I don't want Andy to leave his job, which he's doing very well, as the Mayor of Greater Manchester. I really don't want to have to work with what would likely be a reform mayor. So I don't think Andy should leave his post at the moment.
Graham Stringer, thank you very much for joining us. Well, here in the studio is the Labour MP for Warrington North, Charlotte Nichols. Charlotte, thank you very much for coming on the show. I mean, we've had the succession of MPs tonight coming in here down the line saying that the Prime Minister needs to go. Do you agree?
I do, and it's more in sadness than in anger that I say that. I think all of us have wanted to give him the benefit of the doubt, have wanted to give him time to improve, to succeed. But I think he has run out of road, and fundamentally he's not able to meet the political moment for where we are.
And why do you think that is? What's gone wrong here?
I think he could go down in history as being the sort of greatest foreign secretary that we've ever had, but what he hasn't had is the amount of domestic grip that is needed when you're Prime Minister. And it's, you know, we've seen it reflected in the local election results most recently, but actually it's not really been about that for me. It's been about things like the Hillsborough Law, which he gave his personal commitment to, which is deeply important to constituents of mine who are Hillsborough families, people that I know who've been infected by the infected blood scandal. He gave his personal commitment that that legislation was coming forward. And yet, 2 years in, he has not been able to drive that through, despite all of us in the party supporting it and wanting to see that on the statute book.
So things are just not getting done?
Exactly. And it's, you know, we've seen time and time again the manifesto that we were elected on, time being taken away from delivering that by these kind of side issues and things that have kind of come out of nowhere, that no one really asked for, that we've burned through enormous amounts of political capital on, whether it's the Courts and Tribunals Bill, whether it's, you know, winter fuel, whether it's things like, you know, the...
All sorts of issues.
The ID cards. I mean, you know, why are we doing these things? And ultimately, it goes back to the decision-making and leadership of Keir Starmer. It's not the party, and it's the party and my constituents that my loyalty is to, not to the Prime Minister.
Nevertheless, we had one of the Prime Minister's allies on earlier in the programme just warning about the chaos that is going to ensue if, as looks likely, you get rid of you know, the Prime Minister who won on a landslide, the verdict to the markets on that decision. I mean, we're entering a whole world of pain, aren't we?
I mean, it's completely uncharted territory, and not least because in the Labour Party we don't have some of the mechanisms for removing a leader that, you know, the Conservative Party do with the 1922 committee and the men in grey coats that come to tell you when your time is up. But that doesn't mean that it isn't the right time to do it. And I think a lot of us have had some misgivings for a while. We have wanted to give him that benefit of the doubt, recognising the instability that we risk causing, but we have reached a point where actually the risk of him continuing in post is, I think, greater than the risk of him going.
Does that scare you, you know, that we are in uncharted territory, as you put it?
In some ways, yes. But in others, I think that if we can agree an orderly transition and a timetable and can have...
does it?
I mean, it can, and this is the thing. I think we can all, around our kind of collective endeavour, around the manifesto we were elected on, we can get together, we can agree something where we can have the discussion that we need to have about the future direction of this government and how we deliver the manifesto and the mandate for change that we were elected on. We can do that in an orderly way.
But how? Who's going to oversee that? I mean, we had Ribeiro-Addy, for example, on our sofa earlier, who was railing against the decisions taken by the Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood. I mean, there's so many differences of views, different candidates within the party. I just don't understand who's going to ensure that an orderly transition happens.
But this is why we need to have that proper discussion, because ultimately just doing a quick knee-jerk change, you know, a new name above the door isn't going to fundamentally change anything.
How long does it take to have that discussion?
I think it could take, you know, weeks. But again, we need to kind of assess where we are, take a deep breath, have a proper discussion in, you know, as comradely a way as possible. But we cannot continue as we have been.
but I mean, it could take months, couldn't it? And you've got all the time. Cost of borrowing will be soaring. Decisions will not be taken that need to be taken. We could have an attack from Russia in that time.
Well, we have seen in previous circumstances where the Prime Minister has changed in office that this has been able to be done in an orderly way. We saw it when Theresa May stepped aside, for example. That was a transition that was able to take place over a number of months in a reasonably orderly way. Of course, there will be a period of potential instability and discussion about what that future looks like, but the status quo cannot continue.
Do you have a candidate in mind?
I mean, I don't. There's a level of kind of bias in that, Andy Burnham's from my constituency that, of course, I'd love to see a Warrington lad in number 10.
He's going to have a struggle getting back,
but he's not currently an MP, and this is the thing, it's
Who's your number 2?
It's not about personalities, it's about let's have a proper discussion and let's decide who is best placed to deliver the manifesto that we came into government on.
Angela Rayner?
Again, let's have that discussion. I'm not tied to a particular candidate.
Charlotte Nichols, thank you very much for joining us here on The Sofa. You are watching this special edition of the Cathy Newman Show. Dramatic news tonight coming out of Downing Street. We assume that the Prime Minister is inside pondering his position. We have news of at least one member of the Cabinet having reportedly urged him to set out a timetable for his resignation as the numbers of Labour MPs tick up, 70 now calling for him to quit. So the momentum does appear to be unstoppable. And tomorrow is shaping up to be an extraordinary day. We'll explain why when we come back.
I urge you not to look away. If Hamas hands the hostages over, they will end this conflict. The world has been watching. Good to see you again. How are you? Did she say how he was?
The conditions are awful.
The jets were ordered to come back. Historic day here today. How will you respond if India does launch airstrikes?
They'll be all out to war.
I'm just going to put some body armor on. I'm Yalda Hakim.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist... My darling.
Beth Rigby, Sky News.
...is being a Sky News journalist. You said to people, I'm not coming back for more, but you have come back for more. And, well, let's kick off and make a statement. What can our Prime Minister say to you to not impose tariffs? He's coming out! What more do you need?
We're trying to see as much as we can.
We're in an area that's just been reclaimed. Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
People are directly protesting.
The whole neighborhood has rallied around her.
It's been impenetrable to journalists over the last 2 years of war in Sudan.
I've been waiting for this for 2 years. It doesn't feel like a big homecoming.
It was never going to be pretty. War isn't pretty.
Well, welcome back. We've moved studios, you might have noticed, so that Anna Botting can get ready for the wrap, and that is coming up at 10 p.m. tonight. Daily Mirror columnist Kevin Maguire and former Conservative Cabinet Minister Michelle Donnellan will be here to talk about all the day's big stories. I think you can guess what will dominate that discussion. That's coming up right after us here on Sky News at 10 o'clock. Well, let's go back to Sam Coates, our chief political correspondent now, who has been following events all night. And Sam, it's been quite a night, hasn't it? I want to ask you first about Shabana Mahmood and this news that we've broken on the programme tonight about the fact that the Home Secretary is reportedly someone who has gone into the Prime Minister, or at least got in touch with the Prime Minister and said that he should be considering his position. What can you tell us?
Shabana Mahmood, the Home Secretary, told Keir Starmer today that he needed to set out a timetable for his departure. She is the most senior figure that we know of who has gone in to see the Prime Minister in order to tell him that the game is up. Ed Miliband is understood a couple of weeks ago to have done something similar, but with a holder of one of the great offices of state now weighing in and announcing that the Prime Minister's time is up, look, I think that just pours accelerant on what has been an incredibly difficult day for the Prime Minister. Shabana Mahmood, of course, was the sort of heart, the centrepiece move of the reshuffle last September to shore up his position back then. She was brought in as a tough Home Secretary who was tasked with dealing with immigration, issues like small boats, actually appearing to come under something of a bit of control since she came in. And I think that the fact that she has decided to be amongst those leading the cabinet charge, saying that Keir Starmer's time is basically up in number 10 is hugely, hugely significant. She's been fighting to protect her immigration reforms. That's been a big target of many on the soft left of the Labour Party. But instead of waiting to see what happened to her reforms in the weeks that come, she has come out fighting and done this intervention with Keir Starmer today. Where does that leave him? Well, look, I think the next 24 hours are going to be extremely problematic for Keir Starmer. 70 MPs, according to the Sky tally, have now come out to say to Keir Starmer he should go. He needs to set a timetable for his departure or go immediately. More than 24 of them have come just since the Prime Minister's make or break speech this morning. The effort to shore up his own side does not look to have worked. There are MPs that are fighting to keep Keir Starmer in position. That includes some in the cabinet. We heard from them today. Steve Reid, we heard at tea time. Peter Kyle, we heard first thing in the morning. But I have to say that from left to right of the Labour Party, from old to young, from the newest intake to the oldest intake, there are now representatives from all across the party who say that Keir Starmer's time is up. Many inside government are still hanging on to their jobs, not wanting to be forced into a position where they resign. We've had 4 unpaid members of the government, PPSs as they're known, handing in their notice or saying that the Prime Minister should go. Nobody more senior than that has done so at the moment. But each one of these figures that has called for the Prime Minister to go has passed through a door that they cannot walk back. If Keir Starmer tries to cling on, he will have at least 70, if that stops there this evening, figures on his own side who have made it clear they have no confidence in the Prime Minister. And at that kind of level, it becomes incredibly hard to govern. So something seismic has shifted today. I think you can tell that momentum is drifting away from the Prime Minister. Tonight, I expect he will have something of a dark night of the soul. He will have to ask himself whether he can really withstand the pressure. He will know, he will not be oblivious to the reports of us and others that maybe up to 4 cabinet ministers are telling him and preparing to tell him that the game is up, possibly more than that at this crunch cabinet meeting tomorrow morning. But he'll also know the possibility of acute political
political embarrassment. The following day, on Wednesday, is the King's speech. King Charles is travelling down the Mall to Parliament to set out his government's agenda. But what kind of government will be left in place on Wednesday when the monarch turns up in Parliament? There's every chance that it looks like metaphorical rubble when he turns up, if the Prime Minister is forced to concede that he no longer has the authority to keep hold of that job. And with it will go the authority of the very agenda that the monarch sets out. It is a deeply, deeply turbulent and traumatic time for Labour politics. You can see from the body language and from the remarks of many, many Labour MPs that they can barely believe that they're in this position nearly 2 years, barely 2 years on from a landslide general election result, which saw Keir Starmer swept to power after more than a decade of Conservatives in number 10. Yet here we are on the brink of another Prime Minister being slung out of British politics. Is it just the new feature of British politics over the last decade that Prime Ministers barely last 2 or 3 years? Keir Starmer now looks increasingly likely to befall that fate. The question remains, how can he withstand the onslaught coming tomorrow after everything that he's endured today?
Sam, thank you very much for that update. It's been an incredibly long shift for you, and you've already done all of the work on the elections over the weekend, so you never stop. But we're joined now by Kevin Schofield, the political editor at HuffPost UK, and Neil Lawson, who's chair of Compass, centre-left think tank aligned with Labour, and a spokesperson for the Progressive Alliance. And doing a triple shift for us tonight, Ayesha Hazarika and Nadeem Zahawi, who are still here. Kevin, let me come to you first. This intervention that we're hearing tonight from the Home Secretary, incredibly significant, isn't it?
Yeah, Cathy, it's hugely significant. I mean, I think it's curtains for Keir Starmer now, to be perfectly frank. I think the writing has been on the wall all day, really. We've had this steady drumbeat of MPs, one after the other, throughout the day, now hitting 70, calling on him to resign. It's now reached a critical mass. I think we've got a cabinet meeting tomorrow morning, I think, at which other cabinet ministers will join in, basically by confronting Keir Starmer with the political reality that his authority has gone and that he will have to set out a timetable at the very least to say when he will stand down as a Labour leader and obviously the PM.
Neil Lawson, you've been calling for the Prime Minister to consider his position for quite some time now. How on earth do you ensure an orderly transition? How does that work?
Well, the Labour Party is actually quite good at doing this. In the process where Tony Blair said he was going to stand aside for Gordon Brown, that was a 9-month transition in which the country kept functioning, and the party decided in the end that I think only Gordon stood. I think that was the mistake.
Though, isn't it? There was an obvious.
Gordon wasn't.
But Neil, there was an obvious candidate to succeed Tony Blair. Then that is not the case this time, is it?
Well, I think there's an obvious candidate to succeed Keir Starmer, and that person is Andy Burnham, because he's the person with the popularity across the whole of the country and in the Labour Party, and the plan to reset. Well, that can be done very quickly. If a vacancy arises, then we move the writ. You can be in Parliament in 3 or 4 weeks, and I urge the Labour Party.
There's no safe Labour seat right now.
Yeah,
we saw that last week.
There are no seats for Labour under Keir Starmer. There are safe seats under if Andy Burnham was to challenge. And look at the Gorton and Denton by-election, which Labour lost earlier in the year to the Greens, and then polls showed convincingly afterwards that Burnham would have comfortably won that seat if Labour had put him forward to do that. So Burnham can win, I think, any seat in the northwest that Labour currently holds, because he has a particular appeal. He's the only politician in the country from all parties who polls positively with the public, and that's particularly strong in the Manchester and northwest area. So I think Burnham can win a seat, and he can win it on the basis of changing the party, because this isn't just about changing the leader, it has to be about changing the direction of the party and Neil, the country, and Burnham can do that.
So what would that look like? What would an Andy Burnham government look like in terms of policy positioning and its whole feeling?
Well, the crucial thing about a Burnham proposition is he links reform of the state and our democracy to the changes that we need in our economy. And what he's done in Manchester and Greater Manchester is to deliver the fastest growing city region in the country, because he's changed the democratic nature of how Greater Manchester operates. He's built a consensus across the progressive parties so that there is agreement over the long term about how they invest in buses, social ownership, vocational training, etc., etc. So he would bring that same approach to the country as a whole and say, look, we work together in order to do the long-term work that's needed. And the great thing about that is it reassures the bond market that Britain is a good place to invest in, and so borrowing becomes cheaper for the government.
Well, Neil, they're going to need quite some reassurance. Let me bring in Aisha Hazarika, who's here in our Change studio, the newsroom, indeed. Aisha, you've been looking pretty shell-shocked, actually, for a lot of the evening as you check your phone and get some more messages.
Yeah, I mean, it's just coming in thick and fast. But just to pick up on what Neil was saying, Andy Burnham is seen as being a very effective leader in the Northwest. I did a business event a couple of months ago with hundreds of businessmen and women, including many who were Conservative, many were Reform supporters as well. And they were praising him for being able to work in quite a cross-party way. There's a huge amount of energy and dynamism in Manchester and the surrounding area in the Northwest. Growth is going really well. There's a lot of really interesting innovation going on as well. So I do think there's also a sense of optimism in Manchester at the moment. It's a buzzy place. People are really proud to be there. It's got a feel-good factor to it. So I think that is something worth factoring in.
I do think it's kind of striking that your old boss, Harriet Harman, only just went into number 10 with a job. I mean, that could be a short-lived Harman being Chancellor.
I've got to tell you that we did the 7-hour stint for the election night special, and I have to admire Aisha's quick flip to Andy Burnham tonight. That was beautifully done. You were defending Keir Starmer on the night, but anyway.
Hang on, let me defend myself. Let me defend.
Wait.
I'm taking no lectures. The line is grifted between so many different parties. Are you kidding me?
Let me make my point. Tonight,
it's all getting a bit tasty here.
Tonight, Shabana Brutus Mahmood has been brutal.
Goodness. I mean,
she has stuck the dagger in, and I think if the Prime Minister puts country ahead of party, he will call a general election.
That's not going to happen.
We have to call we have to call a general election.
Yeah, you know what? We've talked. I know we've been on air now for nearly 3 hours, and you've made that point several times.
But it's the right point, because to your point, you've challenged every single Labour talking head tonight. Is we're about to be plunged into chaos. The only way out of this is to go to the nation and let the nation decide.
Let me put that to Kevin Schofield. Is that going to be the problem for whoever takes over, that there is going to be this clamour for a general election, if indeed Keir Starmer goes? Because he is still in number 10 as we speak.
Yeah, undoubtedly, Reform will say that. The Conservatives as well. I think there's no rush. Certainly, if you look at the opinion polls and look at the results last Thursday, there's no rush in the Labour Party, and they don't have to. And there's no constitutional requirement for there to be a general election. But I think there's a very strong moral argument that if you are a Prime Minister coming in less than halfway through a Parliament with a completely different agenda, then I think the case can be made for another general election. But as I say, with opinion polls the way they are, I think Labour would be absolutely crazy to go to the country anytime soon. I think whoever the new Prime Minister is would need to come in, try and turn the country around before even thinking about a general election.
And Neil, I mean, if you went for a general election, Labour would get crucified right now, wouldn't it?
Well, I think, first of all, that the country wants the change it was promised in 2024. It's not been delivered yet. I would like to see someone like Andy Burnham come in and deliver the kind of socio-economic changes that the country wanted. And I think, people would, look at that very, very favourably. I think then, we would, if that was to happen, I think you would then think about how soon after that would be appropriate to go to the country, given all the stability that would need to be put in place. But this country is crying out for change, ambition, the kind of thing that was just been talking about in terms of energy, vibrancy, confidence. And you do see that in Manchester, as Aisha was saying. And I think the country could do with a bit of that as well, a bit of the Burnham magic.
Nadine, Burnham magic. I mean, this is the point, that under a new leader, Labour could reanimate, and then Reform's lead in the polls would just evaporate potentially.
Watch the chaos in the bond markets. I think that will precipitate a general election, genuinely.
How many
and
times?
unless Andy Burnham is able to present a growth strategy that is fiscally responsible, that comes away from Ed Miliband's mad position on net zero, that deals with the cost of living, that deals with people's real pain, immigration, then they'll have the same problem all over again. Tonight, by the way, just now, on X, people are vowing to challenge Wes Streeting if he becomes, from the soft left, they're calling it. They're already threatening that they will challenge Wes Streeting. It's chaos.
Well, sorry.
So if Wes Streeting becomes Prime Minister, Labour,
there won't be a seamless handover.
Are saying that they will challenge Wes Streeting and remove him as Prime Minister.
So, comment on that, Aisha, because, there can't be a sort of orderly transition, can there?
Well,
There's no coronation possible.
It's very, very difficult to have a sort of an orderly transition. But I think what our dear friend here tonight has shown is that there is the real danger of a reform-led government with our dear friend Nadine in it and things like that. And I think that's one of the reasons.
He could be the next Chancellor.
Well, that's exactly a reason why people.
Robert Jenrick is.
Listen, you could try and shove him out, but I think a lot of people will be thinking very seriously tonight. Look, it is heartbreaking. I've just had non-stop messages since I've been on there. People are absolutely devastated across the Labour movement about the fact less than 2 years in, we're in this position. But the threat of a reform government is so real that it is party, it's country before party for a lot of people.
Give us a flavour of some of those messages.
Those sort of scare tactics is what buried Labour at the local elections.
Yeah.
Those type of scare tactics. He repeated again in his speech today. That's what I think buried him tonight.
So the kind of messages that people are getting, it's just absolute. People are heartbroken. People are absolutely heartbroken. I think there's a great sense of, I think Charlotte Nichols summed it up, uncharted territory. I think people do feel very anxious. They feel like the status quo is not an option because people are hearing it raw on the doorstep. People have been speaking to councillors, MSP, assembly members all across the country, good people who lost their jobs, not through any fault of their own, but because of the messages coming from Downing Street, and I'm afraid a very toxic reaction to Keir Starmer. Now, I think some of that is unfair and unjustified, and I think a lot of that is on social media, but it is a reality.
And just comment on the Shabana Brutus Mahmood, as Nadeem Zahawi just called her. But, I mean, she who wields the dagger never wears the crown. She knows she will not be in contention.
She's not going to be leader, and she knows
because
that.
Because the party, she's too right-wing for the party.
But just remember, a couple of weeks ago, it was being briefed out that Angela Rayner was saying the price of Angela Rayner coming back into cabinet would be getting rid of Shabana Mahmood. So I think Shabana Mahmood is also, I think she's very, very brave, but she also wants to kind of make sure that her wing of politics is also shored up.
Neil, we're looking at a real shift now to the left, aren't we? That is the reality.
Well, I think what we're looking at and for is a shift to the change that the country wants. They want, a different kind of democracy. They want a different kind of economy. They want real differences in their life, and exactly the kind of thing that the Reform and the Conservatives have been giving the country for the last 20-odd years is massively out of favour. And I go back to...
That's completely contradicts what we saw at the elections last week, where Reform were the victors. So to say that the country wants a shift to the left, it might be true in some seats where the Greens won, but not across the country.
What people want is real change in their lives. They want the cost of living addressed. They want ownership of things like water and energy and rail. These are all kind of progressive ideas, and the country wants that. Reform have dallied with it, but they're not serious about it. A Burnham leadership would be serious about dramatically changing our economy and people's lives and delivering on that. And I think that's why he is the most popular politician in the country, and it's why the Labour Party is now gravitating towards him and recognising that he is the person to take them out of this existential crisis that they've found themselves in after just 2 years and a 165-seat majority. It's a big reset that's now needed, and Burnham can do that.
Kevin, what's your view?
I mean, there's an awful lot of assumptions there that Andy Burnham would definitely get back in. I mean, there's an awful lot of hurdles for Andy Burnham. First of all, he's got to find a seat. He's got to get someone to stand down and trigger a by-election. He's got to be chosen by the NEC. He's got to then fight the by-election, which would be an absolute circus, and then he's got to win it. So I think it's a little bit presumptive, and it's almost taken voters for granted by saying that all Andy has to do is, stand somewhere and he's inevitably going to become Prime Minister. I mean, I think maybe voters in that particular seat. I get that he's very popular in the Northwest. Absolutely. He'd no doubt be the favourite to win any by-election. But I think it's a little bit, when Labour have had such a hammering at the polls last week, it's a little bit, dare I say, arrogant for Labour just to assume that they can impose Andy Burnham on the country as our next Prime Minister. I mean, I think maybe a little bit of humility might be required.
Kevin, got to leave it there. Kevin Schofield and Neil Lawson. And here in the studio, Aisha Hazarika and Nadeem Zahawi have done a triple shift. It has been an extraordinary evening in so many ways. We're now up to 72 MPs calling for Sir Keir Starmer to go, plus 5 MPs who work in the government have gone. Minute by minute tonight, those numbers have been rising. 36 MPs have quit since the Prime Minister gave that speech earlier. Anna Botting is next with the wrap from me. That's all.